I never thought betrayal could cut so deep. I caught her, my beautiful wife, whispering secrets on her phone. I followed her to that secluded park where they shared stolen moments. My heart shattered when I saw them through that cafe window. I confronted her, rage boiling inside me in our once happy home. It wasn't just her infidelity, it was the lies, the deceit. I followed him to the mountains, axe in hand, ready for revenge. The confrontation turned violent, but justice felt empty. The police arrived and the truth unraveled. This wasn't just a story of betrayal. It was a descent into darkness. It had been a tough year for Tracy McMahon. Just 12 months ago, everything was fine. But when she turned 30, life's responsibilities started to feel too much. She missed her days as a student in her hometown, Grants Pass. She didn't like living in San Francisco. Actually, it wasn't the city itself that she hated, but the life she had there. When her dad, Travis McMahon, died 5 years ago, Tracy was heartbroken. She had lost her mother to cancer when she was just 5 years old. After her father's death from a heart attack, she felt alone. Without her Uncle Tanner, Tracy would have been completely lost. Travis was a rich man. His money came from the company he and Tanner had started over 30 years ago. It was a strange company because it didn't have just one main job. Instead, they bought small, independent businesses that offered special services to customers. They would either run these businesses or let other people run them for a fee. They owned car repair shops, fast food places, paint shops, and many other different types of businesses. As they were very smart, the brothers made hundreds of millions of dollars each year from this mix of businesses. After Travis died, Tanner had to run the entire company on his own. Tanner liked working on the ground and hated the business side of things. He agreed to take over only until Tracy turned 30, when she would then take his place and Tanner could retire. He was a tough man and wouldn't be missed much. Tracy was in her 4th year of getting her Master of Fine Arts at the University of Oregon when she got the news. All she wanted to do was paint and draw. She loved art and never ran out of creative ideas. Even though she owned 26% of McMahon Enterprise, she mainly lived off the interest from a $28 million fund her father had set up for her. She had no trouble living on $12,000 a month. In fact, just like her father, she saved more than half of her income each month. She didn't need or want the trouble of running a business, especially one that was forced on her. McMahon Enterprises rented the 10th floor of the Bank of America building. Most of the work involved paperwork, which meant computers and people to use them. As the CEO, Tracy oversaw a board of 8 members. These 8 members made almost all the decisions for the company. Tracy's job was to approve what they decided. The company worked fine until a few months ago. The board had 7 men and 1 woman. Tracy Astles was in charge of the personnel department, but seemed more interested in Tracy than her job. Tracy was flattered, but wanted Andrea to focus more on work. Todd Werner, younger than Tracy, managed the computers for the main office and other business spots. Tracy liked Todd and felt he was the only one she could trust. Todd had no special interest in Tracy, and she liked that too. The other 6 board members were older men who had been there forever. They didn't hide the fact that they resented Tracy for being the chairperson. They believed they were better suited for the job. Their unofficial leader was Derry and Tremble. Tracy didn't understand how Andrea fit in with the old guys, but she knew Todd wasn't part of their group. Weekends were the only thing that kept her balanced. She spent her free time in Oregon doing outdoor activities like mountain biking, rock climbing, and parkour. She went on a few dates and had some casual relationships, but nothing serious. In San Francisco, exercising was harder to fit into her schedule. Urban parkour was tougher than she was used to, but it kept her in shape. 3 blocks from her office was the Heritage Bike Shop run by Tiny Morgan. Tracy visited one day when she was really bored at work. It was a big place with property prices sky high in the area. Most of the bikes were old Harleys and Indians. There was a Vincent Black Shadow next to an Ariel Square 4 and some old BMWs. It felt like a museum. Tracy had learned to ride years ago on a Honda Rebel 250, so she liked the smaller bikes in the shop. Most people wanted the bigger machines, but Tracy thought the 883 Sportsters were just right. A week later, a nice black Harley was parked next to her 1980 RX-7 in the condo basement. She rarely used the Mazda, preferring to take cabs or cable cars in the city. She rode her bike every weekend. Tracy rented the condo because it was close to Japantown and only a block from the cable car line. She could get all the sushi she wanted and had easy transportation to and from work. The area around Japantown was perfect for her parkour. She always got up early, worked out, and then took a shower before heading to work. As she stood in front of the mirror drying her hair, she made a mental note to consider changing her hairstyle. Long blonde hair was attractive, but it was hard to keep looking good. Because she wasn't looking for a relationship, getting a short, boyish bob haircut seemed like the right choice. She was nearly 6 feet tall, mostly legs. The biking and running kept her lean with no extra fat. She needed a good place in the countryside to run and do parkour. She missed Oregon. Once her hair dried, things went fast. Looking good naturally made it easy to keep a natural look. Cotton sports underwear was always comfy. There wasn't any silk, nylon, or lace in her drawer. She finished a glass of orange juice and half a honeydew melon before leaving her apartment. She skipped the first floor and went straight to the basement garage to check on an oil leak in her bike before heading to work. It was still dripping, so she knew she'd need to visit the shop by the end of the week. 5 minutes later, she was riding down California Street towards the cable car. As she stepped off the cable car, Todd Warner grabbed her arm. "This way, hurry, come on, Miss McMahon, move it." It was clear Todd had something serious on his mind. She decided to follow him and see what was urgent. Todd was usually calm and serious, so this was out of character. The Stardust coffee shop was crowded at the counter, but the back was empty. Most of the early customers were grabbing their coffee to go. "Okay, are we safe now? Want to tell me what's going on, Todd?" "It's Tremble. He got a legal order or something to have you removed as chairman of the board. He and his pals have enough stock now to outvote you and take over the company. They've got legal papers saying you're not fit to run the company. There are people waiting at each of the 4 main doors in the parking garage entrance to serve you. They were even at your home this morning. How did you dodge them?" "I went out through the back garage." "What happens when they give me the papers?" "That means you've been officially notified. You'd have to go to court and spend years and lots of money to fight it. By then it will be too late." "Too late for what?" "They plan to sell the company off in pieces. Some of the board members want to take over parts of it. I think Tremble is planning to keep all the transmission shops. How much stock do they have?" "I'm not sure, but I heard 31% mentioned a few times." "They are probably right, Todd. I'm not really qualified to run the company. I thought they'd keep running it and I'd just stay on as a figurehead. I didn't expect them to betray me. Maybe you don't have the experience to run the company, but you're fair and honest." "I can't say that about them." "What happens if they don't serve me the papers? You're still in charge even if you're not there. They can't kick you out until they serve you. Will that stop them from breaking up the company?" "I'm not a corporate lawyer, but I think so. Find a lawyer who can draw up papers to protect the company. Do it as soon as possible. Give me your cell number. I'll call you and tell you where to bring the papers so I can sign them. Put all major decisions on hold until I get back." "Can we do that?" "Damn it, Tracy, I'm not a lawyer. I can only try." Todd had never used her first name before. Given the situation, she didn't mind. He gave her his business card with his cell number on the back. "Do you have any cash, Todd?" "About $300. Todd handed her the money and she thanked him quickly. Todd left through the front door and Tracy went out the back. The Heritage Bike Shop wasn't open yet, but Tracy knew Tiny, the owner, slept there. After a few minutes of knocking, Tiny opened the door. He was greeted with a large cup of straight black coffee. "What are you doing here at this hour?" "I need a big favor, Tiny. Have I ever said no to you? I can't go home. I need to borrow a Sportster, a 1,200 if you have it. I need boots and leathers, too." "Wow, a beautiful lady in need. Help yourself to whatever you find here. I'll get a bike ready." "Any color you prefer?" Tiny laughed a little at the situation. He knew Tracy's position and wasn't worried about being paid back. Being in her good books had its perks. From across the room, Tiny called out, "A destination might help me decide. Can you give me one? Have you heard of Rough and Ready? Been there?" "Done that. Will that help?" "At this time of year, you need long johns under the leathers and good gloves. I think I have a bike with a half windshield. Don't forget the long johns." Given the situation, modesty didn't matter. Tracy put on the quilted long johns right in the showroom. She found some leathers that fit a bit loose but were comfortable for a long ride. She picked her boots the same way, along with heavy wool socks. Tiny wheeled a red Sportster with a half windshield across the floor. This is the best I've got now. Your legs might get a little cold, but the top will be fine. You might prefer one of the gold wings over there. No thanks. This is perfect. Can you help me pick out a jacket and some gloves? Why do I need all this stuff anyway? Your timing isn't great, lady. There's a big snowstorm coming over the Sierras today. By tonight, it will reach the lower hills. You'll be okay until you pass Sacramento, but after that, who knows? Grass Valley and Nevada City often get snowed in, and Rough and Ready is close by. Are you sure you don't want to go somewhere else? Sorry, Tiny, but that's where I have to go. How about taking a car or truck? I can lend you mine. That's no fun, is it? Tiny gave simple directions. He said to go to Auburn and turn north. The first couple of hours were fine. She stopped for lunch in Sacramento. The long underwear seemed too much at this point. The highway speed cooled her down, but she was still warm. The gloves and goggles were safe in her pockets and looked unnecessary. Tom Henderson had just finished tying his ex-wife's old piano to the trailer. Things were tight, and selling the piano would help a lot. Not much else left to sell after this. Let's go, boys. We need to leave if we're going to beat the storm. 2 young boys came out of the house. The place was beautiful, but the house itself was not. You could call it a cabin in the mountains, but it was really a shack in the woods. The best part was it had no mortgage. Bradley was 16 and his brother Greg was 13. The school had let out early because of the coming storm. It didn't seem too bad now, but storms are hard to predict. After we deliver this, we can stop for dinner at the pit. The Jeep Cherokee had no trouble pulling the trailer, but the piano made it wobbly on the gravel road. Tom went slow until he hit the paved road. The drive from Nevada City to Roseville wasn't long, but he didn't want to risk losing the piano now that it was sold. Tom had finished 3 new stories for his children's book series, but they had no pictures yet. His publisher wouldn't give him more money until the pictures were done. All the artists he contacted wanted payment first. That wasn't possible. Tom's wife, Anne, used to do the drawings, but she left him, leaving him in a tough spot. Their only income came from Tom's writing. Luckily, he still earned money from his earlier books. 2 years had passed since Anne left. She left only a note and later sent divorce papers from Reno. The note said she had found someone else, an airman from Beale Air Force Base, and she was leaving with him. The divorce papers stated he was no longer married. Tom had suspected something for almost a year, but hoped it wasn't true. It was hard to explain to the boys since he didn't know why it happened. Husbands are often the last to know. The $600 from the piano sale would buy a month's worth of food and pay off the back utility bills. Everything else would have to wait. Tom was relieved when the piano was finally in its new home. He couldn't have done it without the boys' help. Snow was coming down in big, wet flakes by the time they reached Auburn. He was glad to leave the interstate because the empty trailer bounced around at high speeds. They could have gone straight home, but he had promised the boys dinner at the pit. The pit was special because the New York steaks were expensive. Bradley and Greg enjoyed cooking their steaks over an open fire. It was worth the extra money to Tom. When the meat was perfectly cooked, they ate by the front window. They watched the snow get heavier and the wind stronger. Greg was the first to see the motorcycle appear from the white snow and pull up to the building. The bike and rider were covered in frozen snow. 2 minutes later, they watched as the rider removed her helmet, revealing shoulder-length blonde hair. She stood in the doorway, dripping snow as the hostess handed her a towel. Bradley and Greg thought it was the coolest thing they had ever seen. Tom just saw someone who needed a hot cup of coffee. A few minutes later, she had coffee and a hamburger. Even after brushing off most of the snow, she was still dripping water. Her cheeks were red from the cold, despite wearing a full-face helmet. "What's wrong, Bradley? She just smiled at me." "Yeah, right." "In your dreams," Greg said, not believing his brother. "Were you staring at her?" Bradley shifted in his seat. "It's hard not to. She's really pretty." "Well, try to be polite. Staring is rude." Tom understood what his son felt. He had taken a few glances at her himself. She was very attractive, as Bradley had said, the kind of person boys dream about before falling asleep, the kind a middle-aged man knows he'll never be with. Maybe it was the leather outfit that made her stand out. The snow seemed to be getting worse. Soon, Tom and the boys would have to brace themselves and drive the last 20 miles home. The four-wheel drive would help, but the ride would still be rough. They all agreed to have dessert, but before they could finish, someone interrupted them. "Excuse me, the waitress said the trailer outside is yours." A tall, blonde woman in leather stood at their table. They hadn't seen her coming. Tom was a bit nervous, but he managed to say yes. "I need help. I have to get to a motel for the night, but I'm too tired to ride my bike any further. I saw your trailer is empty and hoped you could give me a ride to the nearest motel. The bike isn't mine and I don't want to leave it here. We're headed to Grass Valley. There are 2 motels there. We can drop you off. Thank you so much. By the way, I already paid your bill. What if we had said no? You wouldn't." The boys grinned. "We can load it for you." Bradley held out his hand and the woman handed him the keys. "Secure it well, guys. Use all the bungee cords and tie-downs." Some knew they didn't need instructions. They loaded their dirt bikes many times before. The only difference was that this Harley was a lot heavier. She sat across from Tom. "My name is Tracy. I chose a bad time to visit my uncle." She held out her hand, which Tom thought was unusual for a woman. "Tom Henderson. The older boy is Bradley and the younger one is Greg. Sorry if Bradley was staring earlier." "It's fine. I thought I saw you looking too. You were quite a sight with all that snow and ice. Sorry if I made you feel awkward. Not at all. It actually helped me get your assistance. I'm a bit crafty like that." Tom laughed at her boldness. The waitress brought 2 coffees, and they watched the boys load the bike onto the trailer as if they had done it many times. The trailer was made for dirt bikes and ATVs, so securing the Harley was easy. 10 minutes later, the boys came in, and Bradley handed Tracy the keys. She seemed proud, and she noticed Bradley go warm up the Jeep so we can leave. By the time Tom and Tracy got to the car, Greg had cleared the snow from the windows, and the inside was warming up. Tracy quickly checked the bike's tie-downs before sitting in the front seat. She placed her helmet with the goggles and gloves inside on her lap. The roads in this area were usually clear, so no snowplows were around. By noon tomorrow, most of the snow would be gone except in shaded areas. Tom drove carefully and avoided braking as much as possible. As expected, both motels had no vacancy signs. Tom pulled over. The snow was falling slower, but the flakes were bigger. "Where were you trying to go? My uncle lives in Rough and Ready. I don't know exactly where, and I'm not even sure he's home. I don't have his phone number. I hope someone there could help me find him." Tom Ready is about 4 miles west of here. Our place is 4 miles east in Nevada City. "Given the situation, it's better if you come with us. We have lots of room and you would be welcome. Tomorrow or the next day we can help you find your uncle. Are you sure I wouldn't be a bother? Won't your wife mind? No wife to worry about? And I think we have some dry clothes for you." Tom noticed his sons were smiling. Then he realized he was smiling too, and so was Tracy. 10 minutes later, Tracy watched Tom make coffee in his cozy cabin. She tried to clean up a bit without making a mess on the large knitted rug. Her socks were wet, so she took them off and placed them near her boots by the door. By then, Tom had the fire going again, and small flames were rising. She moved closer to feel the warmth. The silence between them was just noticeable when the door burst open. "Your bike is in the shed." Bradley seemed proud. I wanted to say more, but couldn't think of anything. Tracy found his nervousness amusing. The boys took off their jackets and left their boots by the door before coming to the fireplace. "I've got some milk warming for Coco. Why don't you find some dry clothes for our guest? There should be some sweats or something in the green trunk in the attic." It was the first thing Tom had said since they entered the cabin. "Find some slippers or warm socks, too." The boys jumped up and raced to the storage area off the master bedroom. "What would you like first? Hot coffee or a hot shower?" "The shower, for sure. I'll enjoy the coffee more after warming up." The shower was hot, and Tracy enjoyed it much longer than usual. The last part of her trip was tough, and she was just starting to feel it. The hot water made everything better. When she stepped out, she saw her clothes were gone and replaced with all of green sweats and wool socks. On top of a big towel was a simple hairdryer. Tracy felt bad for taking so long in the bathroom, but her hair took forever to dry. She was thankful they hadn't offered any used underwear along with the other items. The sweatpants were a bit short, but they worked. Bradley and Greg insisted that Tracy sit on the couch between them. Tom handed her a mug of fresh coffee before she even got settled. "Your clothes are in the washer. They should be dry in about an hour. Sorry for taking them while you were in the bathroom, but it seemed like the best thing to do. I didn't know what to do with the leather stuff, so I hung it over some chairs." For the next 2 hours, Bradley and Greg bombarded Tracy with questions. Where did she come from? Where was she going? Was she married? How long would she stay? How old was she? Why wasn't she married? The questions seemed endless but fun, like a game of 20 questions. She asked a few questions herself, mostly about the boys, but also about their father. She avoided asking about their mother. Tom sat on the side watching but not joining in. "All right, boys, that's enough. Get ready for bed and let the lady rest." Reluctantly, the boys left the room. "Just one more question. How do you like your eggs?" Bradley smiled brightly. "I usually have fruit for breakfast, but scrambled eggs are fine if that's what you have." But the boys gone, the room felt more relaxed. Tom took Tracy's empty cup. "This is the last of it. Should I make more?" "No, thank you. I've had plenty, and I think I'm ready for bed, too." The dryer had long finished its job, so Tom neatly folded the clean clothes, cotton underclothes, long johns and socks, and placed them beside her on the couch. "We can find more suitable clothes in the morning. It's my wife's old stuff, but some of it should fit you if you don't mind used clothes." I take it from the sweatpants that she wasn't very tall. Tom smiled at her remark and led her down the short hallway to the master bedroom. "I'll take the sofa. You get the bed after that ride." Tracy didn't argue. She smiled, said, "Good night," and closed the door. Waking up in a strange house always feels odd. Tracy felt the cold and dampness as she got out of bed. A musty smell lingered from the fire that had died out during the night. The welcoming aroma of freshly brewed coffee quickly replaced the musty smell. As she entered the living room, she noticed a new fire starting on top of the dead coals in the fireplace. She also saw the smiling faces of the 3 men at the pine kitchen table. She felt a bit shy, but also pleased by the attention. Tom placed a mug of coffee in front of her as Bradley sat down half a cantaloupe at her designated seat. "Good morning," they all said in unison. Tracy smiled and nodded. "The melon is nice. I wasn't expecting it." Bradley got up early and went to the market to get it. He also got a honeydew just in case. Tom looked a little different this morning. His beard was gone and he wore a freshly ironed flannel shirt. "I didn't think the stores would be open so early," Bradley chimed in proudly. "They weren't, but I went with the milk delivery man. Mr. Springer let me have the melons when I told him it was a special occasion. That was clever and I appreciate it. I cleaned your Harley. I got all the dirt out and blew it clean with the air gun. It's ready to go if you need it," Greg added. "Happy to contribute." Tracy was just starting her breakfast when the school bus honked. The boys grabbed their bags, and as they headed out the door, Bradley turned. "You'll be here when we get home, right?" She just smiled and nodded yes. After the boys left, Tracy and Tom sat in silence. Tom ate an English muffin with honey. Tracy smiled to herself, amused by Tom's slight discomfort. She didn't want to seem pushy, but felt she should say something to make him feel better. "You mentioned you might have some other clothes for me. I'm not too eager to put that leather stuff back on." "No problem. I hope you don't mind wearing used clothes. They belong to my wife. Some might fit, but she was shorter than you. I washed everything before putting it away, so it's all clean." There was a storage room off the master bedroom. It was unheated but dry. Tom showed her 2 large trunks and left her to search through them. 20 minutes later, Tracy had an armful of clothes she could use. Tom seemed pleased she found anything at all. She still needed some practical shoes that fit. The snow was starting to melt, and a couple of hours only small patches in the shaded areas would be left. "Tracy, I don't know your last name, and I don't feel right calling you by your first name without knowing you better. What do you prefer?" "Tracy is fine. My last name is McMahon." "Okay, Tracy it is." I answered to Tom. "Tom, I really appreciate all you and the guys have done, but I need to move on now. I'll return these clothes as soon as I can. Right now I need to find a place to stay. We can take the Jeep downtown and see what's available. We can also get you some shoes." Tom didn't really want her to leave. Anne's clothes fit Tracy just enough to be decent, but they didn't really suit her. Even though she looked a bit like a bag lady, Tom still thought she was pretty cute. Cute felt like the right word. If he thought of her as beautiful, he'd be too nervous to talk to her. She had to be cute for now. The sun was bright and the sky clear as they walked to the car. It was a big change from the previous day. The bell-bottom jeans were a bit short, but since the waist was loose, it balanced out. The sweater covered her midsection, which she preferred. There was nothing wrong with her torso, but she felt better not showing it off. She was looking forward to getting new shoes. It was a short drive to town. "Are you sure you wouldn't be better off staying with us?" The boys and I enjoy having you around." Tracy felt at home with the Hendersons, but staying longer could get complicated. She smiled at Tom's offer as she thought of a way to politely say no. The problem was, she wasn't really sure she wanted to say no. "I'll make a deal. If I can't find my uncle or he's not around, I'll think about staying with you a bit longer." They were quiet for a few minutes. "I might take a while picking up some things. Could you drive down to Rough and Ready and see if anyone knows where Tanner might be? Do you have an address or phone number? I only know his name, Tanner McMahon, and that he's somewhere in the Rough and Ready area. Oh, look, Tom, can you drop me off there?" The building was old, but the sign out front was new. Sierra Outfitters was exactly what Tracy needed. "Are you sure? The boys and I checked it out when it opened. They have good stuff, but it's expensive. Some guy from San Francisco took over the building about 6 months ago." As she jumped out of the Jeep, Tom waved and shouted, "I'll be back in about an hour. Okay, make it 2. The store was perfect. It was like Cabela's mixed with Land's End. Tracy felt at home. The selection was small, but exactly what she needed. "Good morning. Can I help you?" Tracy could tell this guy was from San Francisco. She wasn't one to stereotype, but this was obvious and a nice surprise. She wouldn't have to deal with someone who looked down on her. "I think I need a cart. Hi, I'm Lance, and I'll be your personal cart." She held out his arms and smiled, but not in a snarky way. She liked Lance, but doubted it was his real name. Nobody names their kid Lance. "Okay, let's get started. First, I need some parkour shoes. I have a nice selection of Ariakis on the side wall. I'm sure we'll find something that works for you." That was the start of a fun shopping spree. By the time 2 hours passed, Tracy had a big pile of items. She had a complete wardrobe and some extras she couldn't resist. During that time, she got Lance to admit his real name was Brian. He moved from the city when his mom had a stroke. Brian's partner, a practical nurse, was helping take care of her while Brian ran the store. He missed his old life but was glad to be home. The bill was over $4,000. Good stuff costs money. Tracy pulled out her American Express card but stopped. If someone was looking for her, they could track her card usage. She hesitated before handing it over. "Is there a problem, Miss McMahon? You know who I am. Why didn't you say something? I didn't think it was needed or appropriate. If there's something wrong, I'd be glad to help." The offer to help was appreciated, but Tracy didn't know what kind of help she needed. She noticed Tom parking the Jeep and quickly looked for a solution. Before she could speak, Brian said, "You don't have to pay now. Take the things and pay me when it's convenient." "Are you sure?" "Miss McMahon, I trust you. Are you almost done?" Tom asked with a smile, looking at the large pile of packages. "Would you mind taking these to the car while I pay for them?" "No problem." Tom grabbed an armload, but it would take several trips. When he was out of earshot, Tracy wrote a number on a piece of paper for Brian. "Call this guy in San Francisco and have him bring you $10,000 in cash as soon as possible. I'll pick it up here. Don't mention my name. Please don't tell anyone you saw me." Tom was intrigued but flattered that Tracy trusted him. As she picked up some bundles, Brian handed her a business card. "I'm not trying to get into your business, but if you're trying to stay under the radar, I suggest a new hairstyle and dye job." The card was for a nearby beauty shop. "Your privacy is safe with me," he assured. Tracy gave him a silent thank you with a nod as she and Tom carried the last of their bags out. "I'm sorry. I got caught up in it. Your wife's clothes were nice, but these will fit better and won't remind you of her." Tom discovered where Tanner McMahon lived. Tanner was on a week-long trip to Mount Shasta for fishing. He loved the mountains and enjoyed catching brook trout. Tom got this info from the housekeeper, though he wasn't sure if she was telling the truth. After grabbing some burgers, they drove to Rough and Ready so Tracy could see for herself. Some parked on a quiet road about 100 yards away, up a hill, stood a big stone lodge partly hidden by pine trees. The gravel driveway up the hill was overgrown. It wasn't exactly welcoming, but it wasn't shut to the world either. As they walked closer, the house seemed even bigger. It was much larger than what one old man needed. Tracy smiled, finding it opposite of what she knew about Uncle Tanner. It was a lovely home. Before they reached the front porch, the door opened. A middle-aged woman came out wearing jeans and a flannel shirt, looking out of place with her gray hair and sturdy frame. "My goodness, it's Tracy McMahon. Tanner will be so happy to see you." Tracy didn't know this woman and was still figuring it out while they were led into the main room. My friend said Tanner isn't here. Do you know when he will be back? Sit. Would you like something to drink? The furniture was all made of pine logs with colorful cushions. Indian blankets hung on the walls like art. It felt like a movie set, very Tanner-like. Both Tracy and Tom shook their heads to decline the drink. Sorry, I didn't introduce myself. I am Sarah Weiser. I guess you could say I'm Tanner's life partner. Life partner? Sarah laughed and looked a bit embarrassed at Tracy's curiosity. It's a long story. I cook, clean, do laundry, and keep him company in exchange for a place to stay. Tracy quickly understood and found it amusing. She was happy for Tanner and his new friend. He talks about you all the time and shows off your pictures. Tracy felt a bit embarrassed, especially since Tom heard the comment. Tanner left 4 days ago for fishing. He should be back soon. Up at Mount Shasta? No, near Paxton. I say Mount Shasta because no one knows Paxton. Sorry. Sarah winked at Tom, who seemed to blush. I assume he doesn't take a cell phone. You know him well. Leave me your number and I'll have him call you when he's back. Are you staying nearby? Tracy wrote her cell number on a pad. Then she handed it to Tom. Maybe your house number 2? She turned to Sarah. I'll be staying with Mr. Henderson for a few days in Nevada City, so I'll be close. They all stood to leave as if on cue. I hope you and Mr. Henderson can join us for dinner when Tanner returns. Or Sarah. We'd love to. Walking back to the Jeep, Tom was smiling. What's funny, Mr. Tom? Nothing much. It's just when you made it sound like we were a couple. I thought that was cute. He was right, but she had no reply for that. I'm glad you decided to stay by the way. Nearly back to Grass Valley, Tracy pulled out a card Brian had given her. Can you drop me at the Triple Cut? It's near where I got my clothes. I know the place. How long will you be? A couple of hours. Can I call you? Bradley will be home from school. I'll send him to pick you up. He'll like that. Bradley and Greg were waiting outside the Triple Cut when Tracy came out. At first, they didn't recognize her. It wasn't the new clothes, but the short haircut with a hint of red. She jumped into the front seat and buckled up. Do you like my new look? Greg was silent and Bradley seemed lost for words. Before you looked sort of stylish, now you look more like a mom. Is that good? Greg finally spoke. You look like a cool mom. Thanks. Not what I aimed for, but thanks. The roads were clean and dry on the ride back, but the ground was still mushy and slippery. Any outdoor activities would have to wait. Tracy hadn't spent much time with kids and didn't know how to start a conversation. She usually did well in social situations, but this was different. Tom Henderson was beside the cabin splitting wood, piles of logs on one side and neatly stacked wood on the other. The three of them walked onto the porch. Bradley noticed Tracy's interest. He's been like that since Mom left. What do you mean? She was curious about Tom's wife. He has OCD, Greg said as he entered the cabin. Tracy and Bradley sat on the porch steps. Greg and I used to split and stack all the firewood. One day after Mom left, Dad told us he would handle everything from now on. All we had to do was make sure there was dry wood by the fireplace. Some days he stays outside until it's dark, chopping wood. He doesn't even come inside for dinner. At first his hands got really bad blisters, but now they are tough and rough. He never seems to get tired. That's a lot of wood. There's 10 times more behind the cabin. We have enough wood to last 5 years, but he keeps going. We struggle to pay bills sometimes, but he still gets more truckloads of logs delivered. That's a lot of anger. She saw a connection between the chopped wood and Tom's anger towards his wife. Tom saw Bradley and Tracy sitting on the porch. He had a good rhythm going and didn't want to stop, but he thought it might be better to hide his obsession. He hoped it wasn't too late. Nice haircut. She felt happy because he seemed sincere. It wasn't what she was looking for, but she appreciated it. I'll start the chili. Bradley seemed eager to leave Tracy and his dad alone. He does most of the cooking. It's not very good, but it fills us up. I've been here just a day and 2 people already recognized me. I thought I needed to change how I look a bit. I don't want to be nosy, but why did you have to do that? At this point, Tracy felt it was okay to share a bit of her problem. There were some bad people trying to take over my dad's company. To do that, they needed to serve me with some legal papers. I came here for 2 reasons: to avoid them and to get my Uncle Tanner to help me. He helped start the company with my dad years ago, so I guess you could say I'm hiding out. Sounds interesting. Must be nice to have a little thrill in your life. Tom, yes? You smell bad. You should take a shower before supper. He laughed. You're right. I promised to smell better by supper time. While Tom showered, Tracy took off all the tags from her new clothes. He had emptied out a whole dresser for her, more than she needed. There was a new toothbrush and hairbrush on top of the dresser. She felt welcome. The best part of the evening came after supper from Greg. You said last night that you were a trusseuse. I couldn't find it in the dictionary. What is it? It's French. Do you have a computer? Yeah, look it up on the computer and tell me what it is. Tracy and Tom were alone quickly as the boys rushed to the computer. Wow, you're like a sneaky school teacher. That's not what Greg called me earlier. Should I worry about what my son said? No, of course not. He said I looked like a cool mom when I came from the hairdresser. Well, I apologize. You aren't old enough to be a mom, you rascal. That's not what you should apologize for. Sorry, but that's the best I can do if you want honesty. Things were quiet for a few moments. Tom filled the coffee cups and noticed Tracy was smiling. I know it's not my place, but can you tell me something about your wife? Tom said nothing. It was clear from his face and body that he didn't want to talk about it. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to bring up a bad memory. I won't mention it again. The silence felt awkward. That's okay. It's hard for me to talk about. Anne left 2 years ago without a word. I had suspected something for a while, but never knew for sure. She left with a sergeant from Beale Air Force Base near Marysville. I don't know how they met. 6 months later, I got a notice that she had divorced me in Nevada. It was final, and I didn't even know it was happening. She didn't ask for anything, at least. I never had a chance to fight it. It hurt me in 3 ways. She left the kids, she embarrassed me, and she took away part of our income. I write children's books and used to do all the drawings for the stories. Now I take out my anger on the poor logs in the backyard every day. Have you heard from her since? She sends birthday cards to the boys, usually with $10 inside. That's all. I don't know where she is now. Do you think she'll come back? God, I hope not. Tom started to pick up the coffee cups just as the boys came back. Can you teach us? Can you show us how to do parkour? Greg seemed more excited than Bradley, but both were interested. Tracy was impressed. Did you find a list of the moves? Bradley held up the printed sheet. Tracy stood up. Tom, the boys and I need to talk for a few minutes. Could you make some fresh coffee? Tom smiled. Making her happy was his top priority. Tracy sat on one of the bunk beds facing her 2 eager students. Tonight, study all the moves. Tomorrow after school, go to Sierra Outfitters and look for Brian. Ask him for shoes and gloves. Tell him to put it on my bill. Don't tell your dad. Once you have the right gear, we can start. Her words were met with a serious silence. She looked at them with confusion. What? I'm sorry, but Greg and I won't do anything without telling our dad. We'll get the shoes and gloves, but we won't keep it a secret. It all made sense. Trust kept the family together since their mother left. Without trust, there was no family. My bad. I wasn't trying to be sneaky. I just thought he might not like the idea of me buying something like that for you. I didn't want it to seem like charity. We can do it if he says it's okay. Tracy's embarrassment was interrupted by a voice from the doorway. It's all right, guys. I think it would be fine if Miss McMahon got some equipment for you. Of course, I expect her to stay until you both learn how to use it properly. Tracy was amazed at how easily Tom had calmed a tense situation. She knew now that he wanted her to stay, and she wasn't unhappy about that. She felt comfortable here. She felt comfortable with Tom. The boys high-fived each other as Tracy left the room with a big smile. Well, that was embarrassing. I apologize for trying to get your sons to do something behind your back. I assure you it will never happen again. Don't worry too much about it. Sometimes keeping a little secret can be fun, though this wasn't one of those times. Are you mad at me? Absolutely not. I'm glad you care enough to help them. They need something like that. We are slowly turning into a pretty gloomy group. And what can I do to brighten your day? Tom handed her a steaming cup. Let me keep making coffee for you and pay you back for the shoes and gloves. Tom and Tracy both put their feet up on the coffee table at the same time and laughed. The next few moments of warm silence were finally broken when Tom asked if she wanted to watch a movie. They both fell asleep on the couch before it was over. It had been a busy day. Tracy was awakened by the giggles of the 2 boys in the kitchen. Somehow she and Tom had ended up side by side on the couch. With a sheepish grin, she got up and made her way to the bathroom. She noticed the glee from the kitchen as she left and realized she was also smiling. Tom was helping the boys when she returned, and he had a playful look on his face. He smiled, but didn't say anything. A few minutes later, the school bus horn was blowing. It was going to be another busy day in the foothills. Tracy noticed that she and Tom worked well together in the house. The morning routine and chores were done without any awkwardness. They moved around like they had been doing this for years, even though it was only the second day. The new clothes were a blessing. She carefully put the leathers and boots away in case she needed them later. Tom seemed a little sad when Tracy left the house for a run. He watched as she started down the road, as if he was worried she wouldn't come back. She glanced back and smiled to herself. She would be back and he would be smiling again. After running for a while, she cut off into the woods. The rocks were just what she was looking for, but the ground was still mushy from the melting snow. It would be a day or two before she could bring the boys out. Today, she could scout out some good training spots and get a little workout herself. The rocks were dry enough that she found a few great places to do different types of vaults. In 20 minutes, she was ready to head back to the house without returning to the road. It was a great place to work out. While she was heading back, she wondered who owned this land. It was too rough to build on, but she liked it. Tom was splitting wood again when he saw her come out of the woods at the back of the property. Tracy slowed to a walk as she crossed the clearing. He had his shirt off, and she noticed how strong his forearms looked. She wondered if the constant exercise had built up his heart and lungs as well as his muscles. "I hope to go downtown for lunch, Mr. Henderson, but it looks like we both need showers now. I don't know which of us is sweating more." Tom sat down the axe and sat on his chopping stump. We could save time by showering together. It was the first time he had made a joking remark like that. Tracy was hoping he would loosen up a bit so she wasn't upset. "If we did that, I'm afraid we'd never get to town." She started towards the house, then turned with a little smile. "Thanks for the offer, though." Tracy was just finishing her shower when she heard the phone ring. A few moments later, Tom knocked lightly on the door. "Tracy, Sarah Weiser is on the phone. Do you want to take it or call her back?" She didn't bother answering, but just opened the door with a towel wrapped around her. Her host had a hard time hiding his sheepish grin. She found she enjoyed teasing him, though she knew it was more like playful banter. "Hi, Sarah. Do you have good news for me? Your uncle is on his way home right now. He was hoping you and your friend could come for lunch. Anytime between 12 and 1 would be fine. My friend and I will be there if he doesn't take too much time in the shower." Tracy heard a slight laugh from Sarah at the other end. "Okay, we'll see you soon." Tracy clicked the phone off and smiled at Tom. "Hurry up and take your shower because we have a lunch date." She glanced down at his worn-out shoes. "Maybe you better make that a quick one. It was a nice lunch." Tanner made Tom feel comfortable, and Sarah was the perfect hostess. Tom and Tanner chatted about simple things while Sarah and Tracy cleared the table. Then, as if planned, Sarah took Tom outside and Tanner and Tracy went to the den. For the next hour, Tom got a complete tour of the McMahon property. The property was much bigger than Tom expected, even including the land across the road. Sarah was fun to talk to and kept him engaged while Tanner and his niece worked through their business. Tom didn't feel left out. In fact, he was glad not to be involved in whatever had brought Tracy to his doorstep in the first place. Before long, Tracy and Tanner were back on the front porch. She and Tom thanked their hosts for lunch and then headed home. "You look happy. I guess things went well with your uncle," Tom said. "Yes, everything went great. My dad was a better businessman than my uncle, but Tanner is tougher. If anyone can fix this mess, it's him." "You know I have no idea what you're talking about," Tom replied. "I know, and I appreciate that. You've been very understanding, and I promise to thank you for your kindness." "Wow. I always wanted to get a reward," Tom joked. Tracy was pleased with how things were going with Tom. This wasn't what she had planned, but it was turning out to be a lot of fun. She wasn't in a hurry to go back to San Francisco. "Tom, I need to stop by Sierra Outfitters and a grocery store on the way home. I promised the boys spaghetti for dinner." Brian smiled as Tracy walked into the shop. He reached under the counter and handed her a manila envelope. "Your friend didn't stay long. I tried to get him to stay for dinner, but he said he had to go back to the city. He also thought someone might have followed him." "Oh, no. Is that why he left so quickly?" "Yeah. He said he was going to drive around to lose them, but it could have been too late." Tracy opened the envelope and paid Brian what she owed, plus an extra amount to thank him and cover the boys' purchases. She told him to expect the boys later. He was happy for the extra business and money. Once home, it took Tracy about 10 minutes to get the sauce started for dinner. "Tom, while the sauce is simmering, why don't you show me what you do or used to do for work?" Tom seemed a bit hesitant, but showed her his workspace. He had a table where he wrote stories, and his late wife had used it to draw the pictures for his books. The drawings were simple, but matched the stories well. Tracy started thinking about how she could recreate the illustrations without losing their charm. She had all the materials she needed, and anything missing could be found nearby. The problem was how to suggest this to Tom without upsetting him. Would he be open to her help or get mad at the idea? Tom noticed Tracy was studying the drawings, not just looking at them. She seemed to know a lot about art, and he started to feel excited about her interest. "You know something about art, don't you?" he asked. It was an opportunity for Tracy. "Yes, a little," she said, not wanting to give too much away. "Everything you need is right here. If you want to try it out, I can leave you alone for a while. I have some wood to chop. Maybe I should read one of the books first?" Tracy wanted to sit on the porch and read, but decided to stay inside. Tom's constant wood chopping outside was distracting. She needed to find a way to make him stop without directly addressing it. 30 minutes later, she went back to the workroom. She tried to ignore the sound of the acts as she practiced the skills needed to make good illustrations for the books. If she was to start drawing for his stories, the wood chopping had to stop. Hopefully, her work would be good enough for Tom and his publisher. Every 30 minutes, Tracy stirred the sauce. A little red wine made it taste better. The boys came in all smiles wearing their new shoes. They had put them on at the store and ran home. Tomorrow, she'd show them how to get the most out of them. She started boiling water for the pasta and stepped out onto the porch. "You should take another shower if you want to enjoy my spaghetti," she said. She realized she sounded like a wife. This was new for her, but something she felt she could get used to. Tom smiled, picked up his shirt, and walked towards the house. He thought he could get to enjoy this. The evening got quiet after the boys went to bed. A cold bottle of wine that Tom brought out was slowly disappearing as they both stared into the fire. Tracy spoke first. "Tom, I need to understand why you chop wood all the time. I'm not prying, but it seems very important to you. I'm not sure. I can't afford professional help, and honestly, I don't think I need it. It's not a compulsion. The boys joke about it, but I think I can stop any time. I'm just really angry about what Anne did to us. That's all I think about when I'm swinging that axe. I don't want revenge, but some closure would be nice." "Is there anything I can do to help?" Tracy asked. Tom smiled at her as he thought about her question. "Yesterday, I spent more time thinking about you than I did thinking about Anne. That's good, right? I don't know. Most of the time, I was thinking about us taking a shower together. I might be replacing my anger with another feeling." Tracy laughed and had to put down her wine glass. "Now you're trying to blame it on me. That's not fair. If I drink any more wine, I'll have to go outside and start splitting logs again." Okay, I get it." She took the glass from his hand, put it on the table, and walked to the bedroom. "I hoped to do this when the boys weren't home, but you're being such a pain, we'll have to risk it now." They locked the bedroom door, but the cabin was still small. For the next hour, Tracy helped Tom release all the tension he had, and some of her own. It was exciting for them to stay quiet. Sometimes they had to muffle their sounds with pillows. Eventually, they both fell asleep. Saturday morning came with the smell of fresh coffee and bacon. Tom and Tracy woke up, realizing the boys probably knew what had happened. After getting themselves together, they came out to face the boys, who greeted them with smiles and glasses of fresh orange juice. Today, instead of fruit, Tracy had bacon and eggs for breakfast. The meal was quieter than usual. The adults felt a bit embarrassed, but the boys didn't seem to care. Greg finally spoke. "When can we go? We have everything ready. We remember all the moves. How soon can you be ready?" Tom and Tracy felt relieved. The boys were more excited about their Parker plans than how Tracy and Tom spent the night. It felt like the boys approved without saying it. 10 minutes later, Tom watched his sons and Tracy jog down the road. As they disappeared around a bend, he wondered if he wanted to take a shower or start splitting wood. The jog down the road was good for warming up. Without a word, Tracy suddenly turned right and started up the rocky hill. Bradley and Greg watched in awe as she jumped from rock to rock like a gazelle. She used her hands and feet to climb like in a kung fu movie. They had watched all the YouTube videos but were amazed seeing it in person. "Are you two just going to watch? Get moving now?" Tracy smiled as she watched her students struggle with the new skills. It would take time, but they were eager and fit. She climbed down as easily as she went up. The boys quickly learned the importance of keeping their speed and being brave. Hesitation could cause accidents. They needed confidence. Some exercises required special obstacles, so today they could only practice the moves suitable for this area. After 2 hours of training, they were ready for a break. All three sat atop the biggest rock when they noticed an unexpected visitor. "Tracy McMahon, I need to speak to you." He was halfway down the hill looking up at them. She didn't recognize him and didn't know why he called her name. Through the trees, you could see he was tall with dark skin. He wore an old Western-style coat. What worried Tracy was the sawed-off shotgun in his left hand. Bradley grabbed. "Follow the ridge and get back to the house fast. Don't worry about me. He won't catch me in the woods, and I won't let him get close enough to use that shotgun. Go, use what I taught you." As the boys ran down the ridge, Tracy moved the other way. The man tried to follow but wasn't very good at it. He was in good shape but lacked the skills to catch her. She played with him until she was sure the boys reached home, then headed back to the cabin. The boys were smart and avoided danger. When she got to the clearing behind the buildings, she saw Tom splitting wood. He motioned her to go behind the cabin. He seemed very calm considering the situation. Surely the boys told him about the man with the shotgun. She looked around but didn't see the boys anywhere. A moment later, the man came out of the woods looking taller than she thought. He walked straight to Tom, who kept splitting wood. "Where is she? Where's the woman who just ran through here?" Tom looked at the man and pointed at his left ear, showing he had a hearing problem. The man moved closer still, holding the shotgun. Tom stopped splitting wood and faced him. "I'm sorry." "What did you say?" "I said, where's the woman who just ran through here?" The big man felt no threat from Tom, even though Tom held an axe. He didn't move as Tom walked up to him. "You mean that woman?" Tom pointed at Tracy with his left hand as he spoke. As the man looked at Tracy, the axe in Tom's right hand quickly knocked the shotgun away from the man. Tom hadn't moved his arm. The motion all came from his wrist. As the tall man bent down to hold his hurt fingers, the back of the axe hit him in the face again. Around that time, the sheriff drove up to the house. The boys ran out as Tracy walked towards the man who saved her. It was a crazy thing to do. What man in his right mind would face someone with a shotgun while only holding an axe? Tom, Tracy, and the boys sat on the porch as the police took care of everything. They had to call an ambulance for the big guy. He lost a few teeth and had a broken nose in hand, but he could still say that he was there to give Tracy McMahon some legal papers. He thought the shotgun would scare her enough to do his job. The shotgun wasn't loaded. He had followed Todd Werner to the area and talked to the neighbors to find Tracy. They all sat quietly as the sheriff scolded Tom for using too much force. He decided not to charge Tom only because the man had the shotgun. However, he had many charges against the big man. The paper that was supposed to be given to Tracy had mysteriously disappeared. Soon everyone was gone. Tom asked the boys to make lunch and then asked Tracy to tell him what was going on. Given the situation, she felt she couldn't say no. The grilled cheese sandwiches were ready just as she finished her story. She told Tom almost everything but left out the part that she was very rich. After lunch, Bradley and Greg went to the woods to play. Tom went out on the porch, and Tracy brought coffee a few minutes later. "I looked over your drawings this morning after you left. They're a bit different from what Anne did, maybe even better. Don't let it get to your head because the publisher has the final say." Tracy didn't say anything. She was happy that her drawings met Tom's approval. "If you can do 3 more, I can send a package on Monday. What do you think? Just tell me what you need and I'll have them for you by tomorrow evening." Far off, you could hear the boys playing in the mountains. Tracy hoped they wouldn't hurt themselves today. Later that afternoon, Tracy called Tanner to tell him about the morning trouble. He wasn't home, but Sarah, the woman who answered, was very interested. She asked specific questions and seemed to know what she was doing. Tracy couldn't help thinking that she was more than just a housekeeper. When the boys came back, they told their dad they were staying over at a friend's house. Bradley winked at Tracy as they left. Tom dropped them off and bought some shrimp on the way home. The kitchen table was covered with newspapers and piles of shrimp when Bradley and Greg returned the next morning. There were a few half-empty beer bottles beside several empties. It was clear that the special dinner was abandoned before it was finished. Tom's sons turned and left quietly, giggling on the porch before heading back to the mountains. Tracy woke up to the sound of the boys playing outside. Sunlight came through the side window. She thought she had a few minutes for a quick shower before the boys got back. Tom hadn't moved. His muscles were well developed. Who would have thought that an axe could give the same results as an expensive gym machine? Tracy found an old waffle iron on a high shelf. It was warmed up and ready when Bradley and Greg came back from their short exercise. She thought about how nice it was to be young and full of energy. Juice and syrup were on the table, and soon hot waffles were ready. Tom, freshly showered and smiling, appeared shortly after. He noticed Tracy wasn't as cheerful, so he toned it down a bit. After breakfast, Sarah Weiser showed up. The directions Tracy had given her seemed to work. Tanner is in San Francisco, but he'll be back this afternoon. Can you both come over for a little supper? He's bringing fresh crabs from the wharf. Good news or bad news? Can't wait until tonight, Tracy. Did you find out anything about the guy from yesterday? He spilled everything. Tremble hired him and 3 other guys. There was a $5,000 bonus for the one who served you the papers. His trouble got worse because of the shotgun he carried. It wasn't exactly legal. How did you find all this out? Tracy, I'm not only Tanner's guest, but also his personal lawyer. I showed my ID and told the local cops I was there to help your visitor. Heck, I didn't even know his name when I walked in, but nobody asked. I left after 10 minutes, and they never knew why I was really there. You're Tanner's lawyer? I've been for 20 years. By the way, I'll have some papers for you to sign this evening. You never told me what Tanner found out in San Francisco. You're right. Tanner always said you were sharp. Tom and Tracy waved as Sarah walked back to her car. Tracy, she never gave you an answer. You noticed that too. You're getting smart since you met me. Tom spent the afternoon working on the Jeep while Tracy finished the drawings that were still needed. She was glad he wasn't splitting wood. The boys were gone most of the time, so things stayed quiet. The biggest decision of the night was what kind of pizza to order and which pay-per-view movie to watch. Tracy watched with amusement as the 2 teenagers argued about it. Before heading to Tanner's house, Tom packed the manuscript and illustrations for the new book into a mailer. It was ready to be sent first thing in the morning. Now he needed to think of a way to thank his new assistant. The highlight of the evening at Uncle Tanner's was seeing Tom struggle with the boiled crabs. He watched how everyone else at the table handled them and then gave it a try with determination. In the end, he managed, and she found his approach to new situations quite entertaining. Tracy felt she had to tell Tom about the situation. Tom stayed through about half of the long conversation, then finally excused himself. He spent the rest of the evening on the porch, looking at the stars. Sarah brought him fresh coffee and a warm smile. He couldn't decide which was worse, the legal talk or the business talk. Sadly, Tracy had to sit through the whole thing. Uncle Tanner quickly understood the situation. There were a few options to fix it, and Tracy easily picked one. With the amount of company stock Tanner and Tracy held, Tanner could gain full control of the company right away. Sarah had the needed papers, and Tracy signed them without hesitation. She still had her annuity and the money she had saved. Giving up the stock wouldn't change her lifestyle, but would save the company. Tanner and Sarah were moving to San Francisco for a while. Tracy asked if she and Tom could stay at the lodge. Now she just needed to convince Tom that moving there was a good idea. Tom loved the cabin, but it had some sad memories for him. Maybe the change would help. She was sure Bradley and Greg would be thrilled about it. Hey, wake up, sleepyhead. Tom had fallen asleep even though the Adirondack chair was very uncomfortable. Sorry, I guess we're ready to go, right? Right. I'm sorry for the boring evening. Tracy and Tom said their goodbyes and started back to the cabin. Did everything go okay? Mostly. There's one small problem, and I need your help. I'm not sure how I can help, but I'm here for you. Tanner and Sarah are moving back to San Francisco for a while. They need someone to stay at the lodge. I told them we could do it. Tom didn't respond immediately. I thought you were only staying until your problem was solved. Does this mean you'll stay longer? I will if you can help me. I can't manage the big place alone. I'm sure I can do it if you and the boys help. Will you do it? The inside of the Jeep was dark, but she could see his smile from the headlights of passing cars. Her worry was for nothing. All she had to do now was wait for Uncle Tanner to move out. Bradley and Greg were still up when they got back. They hadn't seen the lodge but were excited about moving. It meant Tracy would stay, and that was more important than a new house. Tom and Tracy excused themselves and went to bed. She saw the boys giving each other a high five. She didn't feel entirely comfortable just yet, but they no longer had to hide that they were a couple. Tracy got up before the boys and made breakfast. They asked 100 questions about the new house. They would each have their own bedroom and high-speed internet. What more could a boy want? Tom came out just as they left for school. He ignored Bradley's teasing wink. Tom left just before the post office opened. Tracy was surprised when the landline phone started ringing. It was rare for that phone to ring. "Hello, Henderson residents, can I help you?" It sounded old-fashioned, but she didn't know what else to say. There was silence on the other end. She was about to hang up when a quiet voice spoke. "This is Ann Henderson calling. Who are you?" This was the worst-case scenario of all the people who could have called. Why did it have to be her? More importantly, why was she calling? Tracy's thoughts raced. It had to be one of two things. Either she needed money or she was coming back. The money part didn't bother Tracy. Ann's possible return did. "I'm the housekeeper, and who are you again?" Another pause, as if Ann was struggling to answer. "I'm Mrs. Henderson, Tom's wife." "Oh, I'm sorry, I thought Mr. Henderson was divorced. I wonder why he lied to me about that." "I don't think he really lied. I sent him divorce papers a few years ago, but they were from Nevada and not actually legal. We're still married." "Why would you send fake divorce papers? That wasn't my intention. I just didn't do it properly, so the divorce isn't valid. Why would you do that?" The long pause showed she was having a hard time coming up with a good answer again. "I'm sorry, but that's none of your business. Can I speak to Tom?" "Oh, he's not here. He's at the tax office again. He spends a lot of time there lately." "Why is he at the tax office?" Tracy couldn't help but laugh quietly to herself. Tom was in trouble. He was behind on his taxes for 2 years, both state and federal. He hadn't paid property taxes for 3 years, state and county. His credit cards were maxed out, and he owed money to his publisher for a book he never finished. Jail time seemed likely. I can't believe it. Tom was always so reliable. "What happened? You left him and everything fell apart. How could you ask such a silly question?" There was silence. Tracy waited a moment. "Hello? Are you still there?" "Yes, I'm still here. What did you want anyway? Maybe I can help?" "I have a small problem. I was hoping he could send me money for a plane ticket to come home. Can't your boyfriend help you?" There was no answer. "What do you mean by home?" A short pause. "I don't want to talk to you anymore. I'll call back when Tom is there." The timing of the phone call was too coincidental, and it bothered her. Tracy waited on the porch for Tom to come back from town. She told him about the call from Ann. He didn't say anything. A few minutes later, Tom called the phone company and canceled the landline service. He unplugged the phone and threw it into the closet. He asked her not to mention the call to the boys. Then he went outside to split wood. Tracy felt frustrated. Just when she thought things were getting better, one phone call messed it all up. Why did Ann choose now to call? It only took her about 10 minutes to find the divorce papers in Tom's file cabinet. She knew she shouldn't be looking through his private things, but she felt this needed to be dealt with. 10 minutes later, she was on her way to see Sarah on her bike. Tom saw her leave but didn't try to stop her. She was gone less than an hour. When she got back, she stopped and looked at Tom from the porch before going inside. She was determined not to let Ann get him back. Tom stopped splitting wood when Tracy called him for lunch. The hot sandwich and beer seemed to calm him down. They didn't talk until the meal was over. "I need a new story to illustrate. You said you had several ready. Can you get one for me so I can start?" "Let me take a shower first, then I'll handle it. By the way, will we need firewood at the new place? The lodge has an oil furnace. We only need wood for the fireplace, not for heating." Tom paused for a moment and finished his beer. "I think I want to sell most of the wood behind the house. People have asked about it. I don't think I want to split wood ever again." Tracy watched as he walked towards the shower. Maybe the call from Anne wasn't a bad thing after all. 3 days later, things were going well. Tanner and Sarah went to San Francisco and were staying at Tracy's place until they found their own. Tom had sold all the firewood. The buyer even moved and stacked 2 loads at the lodge. Tom left all the furniture at the cabin since the lodge was fully furnished. The boys had to switch schools, but they didn't mind much. In less than a week, Tom had the cabin rented for a year. Tom's publisher was thrilled with his recent book and Tracy's illustrations. She couldn't finish the new pictures because of the move, but promised Tom she would have them done within a week. Tom was already working on a new book. The next Saturday was for a road trip. They all headed to the city. Tanner said it was safe to return. The bike was on the trailer, so Tracy could return it to Tiny and settle things. Her other bike would come back with them. Tracy let Bradley drive the RX-7 back to the lodge, but only if she was in the passenger seat. Greg was upset about being left out, but she promised to make it up to him later. Tom and the boys were impressed by the condo. Tom realized there was more to Tracy than he thought. He was afraid to ask about it, though. The trip wasn't just for fun. While Tanner and Tracy talked business, Sarah took Tom and the boys to Japantown for lunch. They enjoyed picking sushi from the little boats floating by. Tom didn't enjoy it much because he worried about the prices. He relaxed when Sarah told him it was Tanner's treat. Uncle Tanner's sudden appearance at the company caused chaos. Derry Tremble was fired and escorted out by marshals. The rest of the group, except for Todd and Andrea, were given until the end of the day to clear their desks. Andrea had a list of replacements for Tanner to interview on Monday. Tracy was relieved that Andrea wasn't part of the trouble. Tanner also told Tracy that he and Sarah weren't coming back to Rough and Ready, and the lodge was now hers, free and clear. Sarah secretly handed Tracy a package. By 3 o'clock, the Henderson family and Tracy were ready to head back. Tracy prayed as Bradley pulled out with the car. Tom followed with the trailer. Tracy smiled at the situation and decided to give Bradley a break. She quickly called Tom and told him to meet them at the pit. "Okay, Bradley, go for it. If you get a ticket, you're paying." The car moved away from the Jeep so quietly you could barely hear it. She usually didn't let Bradley drive like this, but today she was in a good mood. Tracy let him drive the RX-7 fast until they were about 10 miles from Sacramento. By the time they got to the pit, Bradley was driving normally again. 20 minutes later, Tom and Greg arrived. Tom gave Tracy a small frown, but then smiled as they walked in for an early supper. The next 3 weeks felt like a dream. Tom's new book was going well, and Tracy was getting better at drawing. The boys' grades were improving with Tracy's help, and Bradley had his first serious girlfriend. Tracy also had time to practice parkour several times a week, sometimes alone and sometimes with Bradley and Greg. Tom no longer had to split wood. Then, on a Tuesday morning, she showed up. "Hi, my name is Ann Henderson. I understand Tom lives here now. I went to his old place first. She was about 5 feet 2 inches tall. Her hair was shoulder length and a messy blonde. She looked like she needed grooming and makeup. Tom's not here right now, Mrs. Henderson. Can I help you with something? And who are you? I'm the housekeeper. I think we have spoken before." Tracy didn't invite her in. They stood on the porch waiting for the other to speak. "Will he be back soon? He's in Sacramento? He'll be back after 3. Are the boys here? They're at school. They won't be home until 3.30. The pauses in their conversation were frustrating. "Don't you want to tell me why you're here? I just want to get back with my family. I made a big mistake, and now I want to fix it. I need to talk to Tom. He'll understand." "Why do you think that? We are still legally married. We are still a family. The boys need a mother, and Tom needs a wife. They needed a mother 2 years ago. Where were you then? Like I said, I made a mistake. I'm here now to fix things. You can't fix anything if you keep lying. Who were you to say I'm lying? You have no right." Tracy glared at her and went inside. She came back with an envelope Sarah had given her. "Let's try this one more time, Mrs. Henderson. If you lie to me again, you'll be off this property so fast you won't know what happened." Anne stood still, not saying a word. "What happened to the man you ran away with? Where is he now, and why aren't you with him?" Anne tried to stand tall before answering. "He was moved to Thailand and didn't take me with him. He left me in Baltimore with no money and no job. I didn't know what to do. So you decided to come back to the man you left and lie to him? I made a mistake when I left. He will take me back. He has to." Tracy pulled a document from the envelope. Do you see this report? It's from the Washoe County Courthouse in Nevada. It says your divorce from Tom Henderson is legal. You are no longer married to him. It's over. Do you understand? Anne hung her head. She nodded quietly. You lied about working in Baltimore too, didn't you? Anne just looked at Tracy, not saying anything. Tracy took out the paper showing Anne had been arrested for solicitation. She wanted to throw it in Anne's face, but couldn't do it. She could see Anne was hurting and guessed she turned to that only as a last resort. Anne, do you want to talk about your arrest in Baltimore? Oh, God, who are you? How do you know all this? Does Tom know? Tom doesn't know, and the boys don't know. As far as I'm concerned, they don't need to. What do you want? What am I supposed to do? Why did you leave your 2 sons? Leaving for another man is bad enough, but how could you just walk out on those boys? Daniel was charming and generous. I met him at an art store in Uber City. Tom was usually busy, so it was easy for me to get away to spend time with Daniel. He told wonderful stories about his travels. He lived the kind of life I always wanted. I was stuck in a small house in the mountains with a quiet husband and 2 young boys. Looking back, I didn't know how lucky I was. When Daniel got transferred, he asked me to go with him, but alone. It was a very hard decision. The boys were closer to Tom than to me, so I left them with their father. I stayed with Daniel for 2 years until he was moved to Thailand. Our parting wasn't friendly. He told me he didn't want to take Hamburger to a steak dinner. You messed up. Don't I know it? What about the arrest? I worked at a Taco Bell during the day but couldn't pay the rent. I got a second job at night cleaning at an Oriental massage parlor. One night they got raided. I was the cleaning lady and got charged with prostitution along with the others. That's when I called you. And Tom does not want you back. Your sons feel the same way. Believe me, you do not want to face them. They know what you did and how you hurt their father. They love him and will stand by him no matter what you say or do. I don't care what you do. I'm just trying to make it easier for Tom and the kids. What can I do? Where can I go? I can help you out. I can give you some money to start fresh somewhere new. I won't tell Tom or the boys what happened. You can send them birthday cards and a Christmas present every year, but please don't visit. Why should I do what you say? And listen carefully. Your husband is very angry about what you did and doesn't want to see you again. When you called last time, I told him, and he ripped the phone out of the wall. That's why I couldn't call him back. They stood quietly on the porch and looked down and shuffled her feet. How much money? I'll give you $10,000 in cash and a ride to the bus station if you promise to stay away. You're a heartless person. Do you know that? Yes, I do. So, do you want the ride or not? 2 hours later, Tracy watched as Tom drove up the driveway in a new Subaru Outback wagon. She grabbed a couple of cold beers while he parked in front of the lodge. What took so long? They put the wrong hitch on. I had to wait for them to fix it. Do you like it? They both sat on the porch rockers, feet up on the railing. Of course I do. What's not to like? He opened his beer and smiled at his benefactor. Your wife was here today. Is she coming back? Tom asked, taking a big sip of his beer. I don't think so. Good. The silence that followed felt like a sigh of relief. Tom, did you read the papers in that folder Sarah gave me? He finished his beer and crushed the can. Yes, I did. Tracy stood up and took the empty can from his hand. We have time for a quick shower before the boys get home from school. Want to join me? Tom smiled and took her hand as they walked into the lodge. Life has days where nothing seems to go right. You know the ones. You wake up, realize you overslept, rush out the door, and the day just keeps getting worse. My day started like that, then got much worse. Jillian and I had been married for almost 5 years. We met at a friend's barbecue and hit it off. Jillian had just ended a long-term relationship, and friends thought I might be a good match for her. At first, I was cautious. I didn't want to be a rebound, but over the months, we grew close. After 6 months, I asked her out. 2 years later, I proposed, and she said yes. I was thrilled, and until tonight, I thought I couldn't love anyone more than I loved Jillian. Greg. Jillian called out while I was shining my shoes for our evening out. Should I wear the black or beige heels? That's me, Gregory, a good guy and a hard-working accountant with my own practice. Tonight I feel like the biggest fool ever. You look great in both, I said. But the black heels make your legs look amazing. Jillian loved dressing up, but she often struggled with fashion. She'd ask for my advice and I'd help her look her best. It was one of the things I loved about her. Aside from a bad start, my day at work was tough. We were auditing a big company and they kept giving us wrong information. Some of it was honest mistakes, but other things were odd. People were trying to expense visits to shady clubs and even drugs as business costs. I was tired and frustrated. Jillian had been excited all week about tonight's reunion. I was annoyed that she didn't notice how tired I was. Usually, she would listen and support me, but this week she seemed too focused on the event, making me feel ignored. Tonight was her high school reunion. Not an official school event, but something her classmates arranged at a restaurant and later at a club. I had gone with her last year, and although I got some strange looks, I had fun. This year, after my difficult week, I wasn't as excited. Still, I put on my best suit and tried to be supportive. When we arrived at the restaurant, Jillian was quickly surrounded by her friends, leaving me alone. We sat with our friends, Lena and Mark, who had introduced us. Jillian was her usual happy self, but barely spoke to me. Lena and Mark kept giving me odd looks. During dinner, Jillian and Lena went to the bathroom and were gone a long time. People started leaving for the club. I approached Mark. "What's going on, Mark?" I asked cautiously. "Sorry, Greg." He seemed startled. "I'm not sure what you mean." I looked at him seriously. "Mark, I swear." I stopped when I saw Lena returning without Jillian. She grabbed Mark's hand, avoiding my eyes. "Let's go, Mark." "Lena, where's Jillian?" I asked, my concern rising. Lena froze, looked at Mark, then around the restaurant, trying to figure out what to say. "I'm sorry, Gregory. She went with a group and will meet us at the club." Without telling me her husband, I asked, feeling angry. "Lena, Mark, what's going on?" Neither of them could look at me. I had enough. Without another word, I stormed out, got into my car, and drove to the club where everyone was meeting. It was a 10-minute drive, but I made it in 5. When I walked in, I saw my wife, Jillian, dancing with another man. His hands were all over her, and the way she pressed against him made it clear this wasn't the first time. I felt my life falling apart. People from the reunion started coming in, but no one said a word. I could feel their pity as I stood at the entrance of the club. I don't know how long I watched them, but they didn't notice me. I stood there until I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned quickly, almost hitting Lena in the face. "It's Jillian's first love, Troy," Lena said quietly. I couldn't tell what she was feeling. They grew up together, best friends through school, and dated all through high school. We all thought they'd be together forever until he got a scholarship in the States, and they broke up. Now I knew the guy's name. I'd helped Jillian through her heartbreak when he left. "They don't look very broken up to me," I muttered. "He's been back for a few months now," Lena said without much emotion. I looked back at the dance floor. Jillian and Troy were still dancing. Lena kept talking, watching them, and Mark stood behind us. "They are meant to be together, Greg," she said, sounding like a doctor giving bad news. I said nothing. Jillian was so devastated when they broke up. She loved him so much. We never thought she'd meet anyone else, but then you met and it came together. Lena tried to explain. My fists clenched as the song stopped. We watched as Troy leaned in, cupped my wife's face, and kissed her. My fingernails dug into my palms. The first drop of blood hit the ground, and it was like a spell was broken. Jillian looked around, saw me, and walked toward me. I didn't notice Mark and Lena leave. She walked up like there was no history between us. "Troy was my first love, Greg. We gave each other everything," Jillian said without even a greeting. I stood still. When he moved for his scholarship, we always said we'd reconnect when he moved back. "I guess he moved back and you reconnected," I said sarcastically, the first words I'd spoken since leaving the restaurant. "Don't be like that," Jillian scolded me. "I know this is hard for you, but Troy and I are meant to be together." Meant to be together. "Jillian, you married me," I exclaimed. She didn't look away. "I'm sorry, Greg. I really am, but we need to divorce. Troy and I are going to get married and have kids." So what was I? A placeholder for the past several years? I almost yelled. People around us were staring and the bouncers watched but didn't move. Troy was coming over to us. "Greg, you were never—" She stopped. "I do love you, but you're not Troy. The love you and I have is nothing compared to what Troy and I share." Troy reached us and put his arm around Jillian, a frown on his face. "I take it you're Greg?" he asked, faking concern. "That's Gregory to you," I replied angrily. He nodded. "Okay, hostility, I get that." He said, "You're upset because I'm taking your wife. She's going to divorce you, and we've been together since I got back." He paused. From the look on my face, he could tell I didn't know. Jillian went pale. Troy didn't know me. So once he realized what he said, he pushed Jillian behind him, getting ready to defend himself. "Look, Gregory," he said, trying to calm the situation. "I'm sorry you found out like this. Jillian tells me you've been a great husband, the friend I couldn't be while away. It would be good if we could all be friends. We share a lot of the same friends." "Not for long," I said, looking at Jillian for a moment, then back to Troy. He looked like he was about to say something, so I spoke first. "Let me get this straight," I said, my voice calm but my anger rising. The music paused and everyone turned to us, even the DJ. "You two think you have true love or together through school? Then you break up because Troy moves away. While Jillian is heartbroken, she meets me, falls in love, and we get married. We're happy for several years." They nodded cautiously, the room silent. "Then true love strikes again when Romeo comes back, and you two start seeing each other behind my back. Everybody knew. You could tell by the looks people gave me all night. Then it all led up to this moment, my best friend breaking my heart in front of everyone." "Greg, it wasn't meant to be," Jillian began. "Meant to be what?" I shouted. No one moved. "All week you've been acting happy but ignoring me. You made me come tonight even though my week was tough. Then you left me the moment we got here. You disrespected me in front of our friends, and then I had to find you here kissing him." "Hey!" Troy tried to speak, but I glared at him. "Don't say a word, Romeo," I growled. "Your true love has shown she doesn't care about loyalty. You say you've been together for months because it's real love. Go away." "Listen, Greg," Troy said, trying to calm things down. "I get it. Emotions are high, but Jillian and I are meant to be together. We're sorry you found out like this, but she loves me and we're going to marry. Naturally, you and she need to divorce." "Naturally," I replied without emotion. "Greg," Jillian said, "I'm sorry, but we thought it was best to do it this way, like ripping off a Band-Aid. It hurts, but it's best." She paused to see my reaction. She had been my wife and best friend for years, and I was always open with her. She wasn't used to seeing me like this. "It's Gregory, not Greg," I replied. She swallowed hard. Gregory," she said, "I know it hurts now, but it's for the best. We're young. You'll find someone else." My eye twitched. She looked even more nervous. The room stayed silent. Troy must have noticed because he cleared his throat. Gregory, this is a lot to take. I think it's best if you leave. Everyone here knows Jillian and I are meant to be together. You'd just be in the way." I smiled. Half the room looked puzzled. On that we agree. He smiled back, thinking I understood. "Good. Now it's all out in the open. Jillian and I will stay away from your place over the weekend so you can move out." "Move out?" I asked, tilting my head. Troy swallowed. "Well, it's Jillian's house, too." "I see," I said, narrowing my eyes. "Greg, Ori," my soon-to-be ex-wife said, tripping over my full name. "We thought it'd be easier for you to move. The house is great for Troy and me to start a family. It's too big for you alone, so we'll sort something out." "I see," I said again, my last word sounding like a hiss. For a moment, no one spoke. The DJ must have thought it was a good time to start the music if there wasn't going to be a fight. As the music began, no one danced. Everyone stayed focused on us. Troy spoke loudly over the music. "I'm sorry, Gregory, but that's how it is. No hard feelings." He stuck out his hand. I looked at his hand, then into his eyes. The look made him pull back his hand quickly. If he could see inside my mind, he'd see me imagining cutting off that hand and putting it somewhere painful. I decided it was time to go, so I turned and walked out. No one stopped me. The two bouncers at the door stood aside. As the doors closed and the noise faded, one of the bouncers asked, "You okay, man?" "No, but who would be after that?" I muttered. "You know," the other bouncer said. "If you wanted to go back and hit that guy, we could wait a few minutes before stopping you." For the first time all day, I laughed. Both bouncers grinned. Tempting, but no. I don't need a night in jail. Both nodded. Still, the first bouncer said, "I've seen a lot working clubs, but that's one of the coldest breakups I've ever witnessed." "Sorry, man." I waved off their sympathy. "Thanks, but I just want to go home," I replied. "And change the locks." "Don't let her back in," the second bouncer suggested. I raised an eyebrow, smiling. We talked for another minute, then I shook their hands and headed to my car. On the way home, I stopped at a hardware store. It was late, but they were still open for another hour. I quickly bought new locks, dead bolts, moving boxes, and packing tape. When I got home, I changed the locks and put together the boxes. In a few hours, I had packed many of Jillian's things. I began to feel the weight of her betrayal. I sat down, poured myself a drink, and opened my laptop. I logged into our bank account and started taking care of things. I blocked and canceled our joint credit cards. I opened a new account and transferred half of our savings into it. It would take a few days for everything to settle, but I had some cash on hand so I could wait. The sugar from the Coke and the rum gave me a boost of energy, so I opened our legal folder. Inside, I found several important papers, the ones for our house, 2 properties we had bought, and the prenuptial agreement we signed before we got married. Now, you might think there was a clause about cheating, but no, there wasn't. The prenuptial was mostly to protect my business assets. When we started dating and then got married, I had just begun my accounting business. I had some smart mentors who gave me good advice. We made sure my business and any related companies were in my name only. Both Jillian and I signed that prenuptial agreement, which stated that my business, other accounts, and its subsidiaries were out of bounds in case of a split. Looking back, I'm sure Jillian agreed easily because she planned to cheat on me someday. But she had no idea how costly that would be for her. That night I slept fitfully, but I managed a few hours before deciding to go out for breakfast. I drove around until I found a great place that mixed Asian and Australian food into tasty breakfast dishes. I enjoyed an extra strong coffee while I wrote an email to a friend at a law firm my company works with. I explained what was happening and asked him to prepare for a divorce. He called me in half an hour, shocked. I told him everything. He said he could file the papers on Monday and would refer me to someone in his firm who could help. He also expressed how sorry he was. I stayed at the cafe for another hour, browsing the web on my laptop and feeling a bit sorry for myself. When I got home, Mark and Lena were in the driveway. They got out of their car as I parked. "Greg? Where?" Lena began. I raised my hand to stop her. "Gregory," I said. "Sorry," Lena repeated. "My name is Gregory. Only my friends call me Greg," I said flatly. "Listen, buddy." Mark started trying to sound nice. "We're sorry about last night. That is not how I raised my hand again," and he stopped just like Lena. I looked at a tree across the street. It had a broken limb from a recent storm. The branch had fallen on a carport but missed the house, staring at it. I felt like the tree. Losing Jillian felt like losing a part of myself. When I looked back at Mark and Lena, tears were running down my face and anger blazed in my eyes. "Don't, Mark. Don't you dare make excuses," I spat. "You knew she was cheating on me for months and you said nothing, but Gregory, it's true." Lena started to say love. I cut her off, my face wet with tears. "Don't give me that nonsense. True love doesn't stab you in the back. True love cares for others and doesn't leave them or humiliate them in front of a crowd. I thought Jillian and I had true love. I never doubted her. I loved her so much I'd have given her anything." "I know," Lena said, tears forming in her eyes. "But Jillian and Troy, stop!" I yelled, the rage boiling over. My tears stopped. "Stop," I said quietly. "Lena, I don't want to hear about Jillian and Troy. I don't care about their love. I've wasted years of my life on a lie. 7 years, Lena, years of being there for her, helping her with her problems, planning a family, talking about growing old together. I was only ever a backup plan. Why does Troy get to come back and take what I worked so hard for?" They looked at me, clueless. I continued, the pain spilling out. "He gets the woman I supported when he left her. He gets all her friends who betrayed me. At least on that last point, they looked ashamed." "Well, forget it," I yelled. "She gets what she deserves now, and you both were part of it, so get off my property." "Greg," Mark said. I glared at him. "Look, I get it. We never thought this would happen. We thought Jillian and you would be happy forever, have kids, but Troy came back and they love each other. We know it sucks, but they deserve to be happy." "And what about me and my happiness?" I asked. "What do I deserve? They had nothing to say." I sighed. "I deserve a loyal wife and friends who care about me, but I have neither, so leave. I don't want your pity. None of you, including her, seem to care about me if it conflicts with them, so if I seem upset, it's because I am. Put yourself in my shoes," I said. I looked at Lena. "Mark, when Lena finds her true love and leaves you, then you'll know how I feel. But Mark is my—" Mark put his arm on Lena's, stopping her from speaking. "Okay, Gregory," Mark said. "We get it. You're not seeing it our way. We're leaving, but is there anything we can do as a last kind gesture? I thought for a moment and glanced at the minivan in the driveway. Yes, wait here. In the next few minutes, I brought out several boxes stuffed with Jillian's clothes, makeup, and personal items. I dumped the boxes in front of them, and a couple of times you could hear things break. They winced, but said nothing. I was going to leave them in the driveway. But since you're here, take them to her new home, I said. But Jillian said she wanted the house, and you were moving. Lena started. I laughed and cut her off. It's not her house. It doesn't belong to her, and it doesn't belong to me either. She's out of luck. Tell her she doesn't need to come back here. Everything she owns is in those boxes. Also tell her the divorce papers will be mailed Monday. I've already removed all her stuff and taken myself off the accounts. Whatever's left is hers. You're not even... Lena started and stopped. What? I asked. Going to fight? No, she's in love with him. She's been cheating on me, and she's lied to me about where her loyalty lies for years. She'll get what's coming to her. No more. No less. There wasn't much left to say, so I watched them load the boxes into their van and drive away. They looked sad, knowing they had lost my friendship by supporting Jillian. If they felt sorry, I didn't see it. That night I got drunk and cried like a baby. I got angry and punched a hole in the wall. Then I smashed a vase, Jillian, and I bought on our first anniversary. I was so mad at being abandoned by my wife and friends. I destroyed the lounge room, throwing anything that wasn't tied down and breaking things that were. I made more holes in the hallway walls, tore doors off cabinets in the kitchen, and put dents in the fridge. The next morning, I woke up hungover with a terrible headache, bloody knuckles, and scrapes on my arms. I roughly bandaged my hands and arms, knowing I needed to see a doctor. I looked around the lounge room. I'd have to replace everything. The hallway walls were full of holes, and the kitchen was a mess. Covered doors were everywhere, and the appliances were damaged. I flinched when I saw the dents in the fridge, remembering how punching it felt good at the time. I found some orange juice in the fridge, along with a couple of Panadol, and took a big drink. After half an hour, my headache eased, and I moved to the lounge room, sitting on the floor among the broken chairs and staring at the cracked TV. The rest of the day was a blur. I went to the doctor for my arms. Both hands had tiny fractures and needed to be wrapped. I got messages from many people, including Mark and Lena, but I didn't respond. I went to bed that night not really knowing what I had done except visit the doctor and stare at the TV. The next day was Monday, and I went to the office at my usual time. My routine was to check emails from Friday and the weekend, then prepped for a 9 a.m. team meeting to plan the week. I had a team of 15 people, and we generally did good work. Around 8:30, my office admin, Colleen, an older lady in her 50s, came in. She looked at me, pulled out a chair, and sat down. Rough weekend, she asked, noticing the bandages on my hands and arms. I had never been harsh with her in 3 years of working together, but when I glared at her, she gulped. Gregory, I'm sorry. It must have been rough. What happened? She asked. I sighed and looked at my screen for a moment, then turned to face her. Jillian left me for her true love, I said in a flat voice. What? Colleen exclaimed. No, you're joking. Seriously, Gregory, don't. I raised my bandaged hands, feeling tears form in my eyes. I shook my head. It's true, I said. Friday night, we had that informal class reunion. It felt like everyone knew it was going to happen, including Mark and Lena. They all knew Jillian had been seeing someone else for months. They all ambushed me with the truth on Friday night. Then I started crying. For the first time since we met, Colleen came around the desk and hugged me. As she cried, I could feel her tears falling on my shoulders. I told her about Saturday, how I got drunk and lost control. I broke most of the furniture in the house and punched holes in the walls. I told her how I went to the doctor the next day to get my hands bandaged, dealing with a terrible hangover. By the time our morning meeting came, we had tried to dry our eyes as much as we could. Colleen brought everyone into the big meeting room on time, and once they were seated, I came in and sat down. I hope everyone had a good weekend, I said. People nodded, but they were all trying not to look at my bandages. This week, I began, but Colleen interrupted, raising her hand to stop me. Sorry, Gregory, but I can't ignore this. After what happened to you this weekend, you can act like everything is fine, Colleen said. I paused, then nodded. She looked at me, seeking permission to explain to everyone. I agreed, knowing she would only share what was needed. Everyone this weekend, Gregory was betrayed by his wife and some friends. Jillian has been cheating on him for months and left him in a terrible way, embarrassing him in front of people, including some who were supposed to be friends, Colleen said. She stopped, then looked at a person sitting quietly across the table. "Isn't that right, James?" she asked. James Colson, one of our accountants, was Jillian's classmate. He and his wife had been there Friday night. James hadn't said much since coming to the office and tried to stay unnoticed. When Colleen started talking, he went pale. When she called him out, he tried to sink into his seat as everyone turned to look at him. He said, "James," Colleen said in a firm voice, "were you or were you not there on Friday night?" "Yes," but James tried to say. "And did you know your boss's wife was having an affair with someone from your class?" Colleen asked firmly. James swallowed. "Be honest, James." James looked down at the table. "I did," he said quietly. For a moment, no one spoke. The room was tense. Until today, I thought everyone supported each other. Now, almost everyone was angry at James. "All right then, James," Colleen said after a moment. "I think you need to leave the room. Consider your future here, because if we find out you supported Jillian, you'll be fired. Do you understand?" He swallowed again, then stood. "I understand." He quietly left the room. No one said anything. I had almost forgotten James was there on Friday. In the chaos, I barely noticed anyone except the main people causing my pain. I cleared my throat. "Everyone," I said, trying to focus. "My personal life is a mess, and my weekend was terrible. I showed my bandaged hands, but we have work to do and clients to care for. This week, let's support each other. If you need anything specific, let Colleen know. I'll be here, but I won't be at my best, so please be patient with me." I almost cried again as everyone around the room showed support and sympathy. Lastly, I said, "Don't be too hard on James yet. I know you're all angry, but let's get the full story before we blame him." People murmured in agreement. Colleen ran the rest of the meeting. Afterward, I went back to my office and stared out the window. A few minutes later, Colleen knocked. Turning, I saw her with a very subdued James behind her. I invited them in, and James closed the door behind him, sitting where Colleen pointed. "I think you and James need to talk, Gregory," she said simply. I nodded, sitting down as James sat on the other side of my desk. I kept staring out the window, my mind full of thoughts. It wasn't even 10 in the morning, and I felt like I needed a drink. James cleared his throat. I looked at him, and he looked down. "So," I said, frustration in my voice, "Gregory, He stopped, then laughed a little. "Is something funny?" Colleen asked. Her professional manner tinged with anger. James smiled, but it was a sad smile. "No, nothing is funny," he said. "My boss is betrayed, our class is divided, and my wife yelled at me all day yesterday. I'm about to lose my job. So, no, nothing is funny, but I either laugh a bit or cry." I smiled back cautiously at him. I always liked James. He worked hard, and until this morning, when Colleen mentioned him, I thought he'd be with us forever. I smiled at him. "James, why don't you start from the beginning?" I asked, trying to sound friendly and supportive. He nodded and fidgeted in his chair. I guess you've heard a lot about how perfect Jillian and Troy were together in high school," he asked. I nodded. "In the past few days, that's all I've heard," I replied. He nodded. "In high school, I was always the math geek. I wasn't bullied, but I wasn't popular either. But everyone watched Jillian and Troy. They were like the king and queen of our year." James looked at me for a reaction. Seeing none, he went on. "When our final year was ending and university placements were coming out, we all thought they'd be going together, but the whole school was shocked when Troy said he'd be going overseas without Jillian." He paused again. I nodded, knowing some of this story, and motioned for him to continue. "Well, they broke up the week before school finished. Troy went to a few parties, but Jillian didn't. During the break before university, I saw Jillian twice. She looked sad and withdrawn. Then a few months later, I heard Troy was enjoying life in the States. He had a full scholarship thanks to his family, and the gossip was that he already had a new girlfriend." I nodded again. Jillian had told me about this while we were getting to know each other. She cried a few times about how much it hurt that Troy left her and found another girl. After one of these talks, Jillian and I shared our first kiss, and I asked her out. After that, Troy became a distant memory for Jillian. That is, until recently, James continued, pulling me out of my thoughts. Well, I went to university too, got my degree, met and married Sherry, and felt lucky to get a job here. His smile was a little sad. I was surprised when I learned you had married Jillian. James admitted honestly I was happy to see how happy she was with you. Troy leaving hurt her so much. Seeing her with a good man who helped her get back on her feet made me glad. For a moment, James seemed lost in thought, so I jumped in. So when did you find out about Troy and Jillian's affair? I asked, surprised at the calm in my voice. James seemed surprised, too, as he looked at me funny, probably expecting anger. About an hour before you and Jillian arrived for dinner, he said quietly. A few classmates were talking. I heard something about Jillian leaving you for Troy that evening. My surprise was obvious to everyone. I gave James a questioning look. He sighed. Until the dinner, only a few people knew anything. But everyone in the class got told that Jillian and Troy were meant to be together. Mark and Lena pulled Sherry and me aside, telling us it was happening. And while they felt sorry for you, Jillian had made her choice and you just weren't part of her future. I started to argue, and that's when Mark reminded me that I worked for you. He made it clear that if I said anything to you, it would be bad for me. He said Sherry and I should leave if I couldn't keep quiet. I looked at James. He was really hurting as he remembered the conversation. I could see him blushing and noticed his eyes were wet. I'm sorry, Gregory. We couldn't stay for dinner. Sherry wanted us to. She wanted to be there for you. But Mark and a couple of the guys basically walked us out, telling us to stay away. James, I started to say, feeling bad for him. He held up his hand to stop me. Sorry, Gregory, I need to finish. I promised Sherry. I nodded again. I was stunned, he continued. I had just been kicked out of my class reunion because my boss's wife was about to betray him, and I was a loose end. Though angry, Sherry and I didn't know what to do, so we went straight to the club. We both agreed we wanted to be there for you. What happened? I asked, tilting my head. I didn't see you there. We were there, but by the time you arrived, we were at the back. A couple of guys blocked us from getting to you until Jillian told you when you left they let us go after a few minutes. Sherry and I ran after you, but by the time we got outside, you were gone. I think we stood outside the club for about half an hour, stunned and not sure what to do. In the end, Sherry convinced me to go back inside and see what was happening. James paused, looking at me to gauge how much more to tell me. I nodded for him to go on, and he swallowed hard. When Sherry and I went back in, we were basically nobodies to just over half the class. The other half was disgusted, and once they knew I worked for you, they kind of surrounded us and didn't let anyone near us for the rest of the night. And I started but couldn't finish. They danced and drank like nothing was wrong, James told me, even though his mouth was dry. I'm sorry, Gregory, but they acted like you were nothing. The bits of conversation we heard told us this had been planned for months. It was worse when we found out Jillian and Troy were planning to get married as soon as they could. James looked at the floor then. He held his hands tightly in his lap. Last night at home, Sherry and I didn't sleep well. We argued about everything, even though we both were upset by Jillian and Troy's actions. James said, "This brings us to this morning, and this," he continued, pulling out a piece of paper from his notebook and placing it on the table. "What's this?" I asked, picking up the paper and reading it quickly. "My resignation," he said, sounding defeated. "I saw it was signed and dated from yesterday." "James," I began. "No, Gregory," he cut me off. "What they did to you was wrong, and I couldn't help even though you've been a great boss and friend. You deserve better. Sherry and I think it's best if I resign so you don't have to see me and remember Friday night?" We sat in silence for a moment. I looked at his resignation and let out a short bark of laughter. The first time I felt something other than sadness and anger. Colleen and James looked at me. I pinched the paper in the middle and tore it in two. "Your resignation is rejected," I said. Behind us, I saw Colleen smile. James looked shocked, but Gregory, what? Why? He stammered. "James, my friends call me Greg, and with what you just told me, I want you to think of me as a friend. You tried to help and warn me, but you couldn't. They were ready for it. But you care about me, and that's what matters. If that's not a friend, nothing is. James, I'm deeply hurt," I explained. "I'm both sad and angry, but I can see you're hurt, too." James nodded. "Sherry and I thought it was best." "I know," I replied. That's why I want you and Sherry to stay with us." For the next half hour, we talked. In the end, Colleen, James, and I walked out of my office and called everyone back into the meeting room. I explained how James was just as surprised as I was and was kicked out because of the two cheaters. As I laid it out and told everyone what we should do, any bad feelings towards James disappeared. By the time we left the room, there were some secret smiles on people's faces. For the rest of the week, I spent most of my time in the office. Besides advising my staff, I mostly worked on my divorce. I didn't end up mailing the papers. I had Jillian served at work instead. Though cheating isn't a deciding factor in Australian divorces, I made sure my lawyers included a clear statement about her cheating in the documents. After she got the papers, Jillian called and texted me a few times. I didn't delete them, but ignored them. I assumed they'd be angry, so I let them pile up. I kept myself busy with bank accounts, asset listings, canceling cards, and insurance stuff. My team made sure all my legal documents were up to date so Jillian couldn't touch anything. Colleen dropped by my place on Tuesday with a meal and was shocked at the mess in my house. She cried as she walked through the rooms, leaving a trail that Hansel and Gretel could have followed. On Wednesday morning, Colleen called my insurance agency and started arranging an assessment of the damage. By Friday, she had managed to get assessors and cleaning crews for my house. Everything would start happening the following week. By Friday night, I was exhausted, both physically and mentally, but I still wasn't sleeping well. So Saturday morning, with no work, I got up early and went for a run. I ran to the local shops and sat at a cafe, enjoying a coffee and a croissant before jogging home a couple of hours later. When I got back, I was surprised to see Jillian sitting on the front steps. I hadn't seen her since the Friday she left me. She was dressed casually but mismatched. It seemed her new boyfriend didn't help her with her appearance. I stopped halfway up the driveway, sweat covering my body. I pulled out my earphones, silencing the loud music. For a moment, neither of us said anything. "Greg, it's good to see you," Jillian started. I spat onto the grass, cutting her off. "What?" I replied, surprised I'm looking after myself after my unfaithful wife betrayed me so publicly, afraid I might have harmed myself because you hurt me so badly. Worried I'd be drunk and unable to function because of how you treated me? I glared at her, and she took a half step back, paling a little. "It wasn't like that, Greg. I never meant to. Hurt me!" I nearly yelled, stopping her excuses. She nodded her head. "Like I believe that, Jillian. You planned everything to tell me you were leaving in front of people I thought were friends. You aimed to destroy me," I said. She looked at her feet. "Greg, it wasn't my idea to do it that way," she said quietly. "Mark and Troy thought if we did it this way, you wouldn't try to fight back." I threw my head back and laughed. "You must be kidding," I said bitterly as I calmed down. "After knowing each other for years, nearly being married for 5 years, you thought if I found out you were cheating on me or leaving me, I would fight for you?" Jillian blushed. "But no buts," I snapped at her. "You lost any right to my care or defense the moment you betrayed me. It took me some time to find out, but now that it's clear, you can leave." "Greg, you can't talk to me like that. I'm still your wife," Jillian retorted angrily. "Ha!" I said, walking up the drive and past her to the front door. I pulled out my keys and unlocked the door. As I walked in, Jillian tried to follow until I stopped her with a raised hand. "You're not welcome in," I told her bluntly. "But Greg, it's still my house too," she stammered. I shook my head. "No, it's not. It never was. The house belongs to the trust, and my wage paid the rent each month to the trust." She looked confused. "Look, Jillian, it's not your house anymore, and you don't live here. Wait here. I have a few things for you." I closed the door behind her. I went to my study and quickly messaged my lawyer to let her know Jillian was there. I grabbed a few things and returned to the front door. Jillian was still standing there. "Greg, she began. I held up my hand to stop her. "Firstly, it's Gregory. Only my friends call me Greg, and you are not my friend." Jillian swallowed. "Second," I said, handing her a small folder. "In here is a check for your half of our shared assets." Her eyes widened. The check she held in her hand told her more than any divorce papers that we were done. "Third, you have something for me?" She seemed unsure, then opened her bag, pulled out a manila envelope, and handed it to me. "I'm sorry, Gregory." "You will be," I said quietly. I opened the envelope with her standing there and flipped through the first few pages. I snorted and looked up at her. Jillian blushed. knowing I was reading her demands for 75% of our savings and 50% of my business in response to the divorce petition. Near the back, I found the next document, a restraining order effective Monday, barring me from the house or being within 100 meters of Jillian or Troy. Really? I asked, raising an eyebrow. She couldn't meet my eyes. She knew everyone had gone too far. Jillian always went with the flow, but now it would hurt her deeply. I pulled out my phone and called my divorce lawyer. I stared at Jillian as she shuffled her feet. Sally, Mike's associate and my divorce lawyer, picked up on the second ring. "Hi, Sally. Jillian is here in front of my house." Besides her demands responding to the divorce petition, she presented me with a restraining order that includes my house where she no longer lives. As Sally swore on the other end of the line, Jillian turned red, hearing the words clearly. Sally would handle it and tell me what to do. "So," I said to Jillian as I hung up, "how does it feel to be one of the most awful people on the planet, Jillian?" For a moment, she said nothing. "It's not like that, Gregory," she replied quietly. "I convinced Troy to give you until Monday to move out so we could move in." I laughed. "You can't move in. It's not your house." "But you can't be here," she retorted like a child. I shrugged. "Maybe. But this mean trick will backfire. Just because I can't be here doesn't mean you and Troy can either. Now I think it's time you left, Jillian. I'd wish you well, but that would be a lie." "You hate me that much?" she asked, looking at my bandaged hands but not asking about them. "You seriously have the nerve to ask me that after what you did and now serving me this paperwork?" I shot back. At this point, I couldn't believe how clueless she was. She stayed silent. "Jillian, you were my everything. You were my best friend. No one else in this world mattered more to me. Then you took that away and one move and treated me like dirt. You've become the worst person to me. So tell me, after doing all this, did you think I wouldn't hate you?" I crossed my bandaged hands over my chest. Jillian's eyes widened. She had never heard me use such harsh language. For a moment she looked at her hands and then up at me. I had hoped. She paused and took a breath. "Gregory, you're right. We had many good years together, but the restraining order is only until the divorce is finalized and things settle down. Mark, Lena, Troy, and I all hoped that someday we could be friends after things calmed down." I snapped. "Friends!" I shouted, making aggressive gestures as I dropped the envelope. "You've got to be kidding me! Friends, if any of you were on fire, I'd drink gasoline just to make sure you burned completely." "You're delusional," I continued, noticing movement behind her. Mark and Lena were walking up the driveway, and I saw Troy staying back at the curb. They must have just gotten out of a big truck across the street when I started yelling at Jillian. "Oh, look, here come our friends now," I hissed. "Greg," Mark said, coming closer. "Calm down, man. You don't need to get lost," I shot back. "We're not friends, not even close. Your betrayal is almost as bad as hers. So don't think you can say anything to help." I glared at the couple who had set Jillian and me up, causing our relationship to fall apart. "Both of you are as guilty as she is," I said, pointing at Troy, who just stood at the curb. He didn't even have the guts to come up and defend her. "Greg," Lena said firmly. I turned my glare toward her. "Don't you dare, Lena. You helped my wife cheat on me." "Both of you did," I said, now pointing at Mark and Lena. "You set up that scene in the club to embarrass me to the max." They paused. Lena started to speak, but I cut her off. "And don't start with that true love nonsense. You tried that before. You both pushed me to date and marry her, and then you betrayed me so easily. If that's what you think love is, then there's no hope for anyone." They looked shocked as I yelled. Then something clicked in my mind. "Lena, does Mark forgive you when you come home smelling like perfume after being at the club all night?" I smiled, my tone now mocking. Lena looked shocked and then turned to Mark. "Baby, that's not true," Mark started to say. I laughed and they all stared at me. "Well, no, it's not," I said. "Mark likes to tell his buddies that only the front room is a strip club. But for a bit more money, you can get a special dance in the back room." I watched as Mark started to protest, but Lena sensed the truth. "Or so he says when we play golf," I finished, crossing my arms, pleased with their discomfort. Mark stepped back. A moment later, he was running down the street, Lena chasing and yelling at him. I looked over at Troy, still standing there, then back to Jillian with a smirk. "Greg?" she said. I glared at her. I mean, Gregory, you didn't have to do that, she added. I leaned forward. Oh, don't worry, Jillian, I said, watching her tense up. That's just the beginning. Mark has many more secrets, and the rest of my anger is for you and Troy. She shivered at my words. What? What do you mean? Jillian asked. Leave now, Jillian, I said, not directly addressing her question. Tell Troy to take you. Run far away, because what's coming won't be good for either of you. Greg, what's wrong with you? Where's the man I loved? She asked, realizing too late what she'd said. He's gone, I replied flatly. You ripped my heart and soul out, and what's left is something dark. She didn't know what to say. I took a step back and slammed the door, giving a laugh like a villain in a movie. 10 minutes later, I peeked out. Jillian, Troy, and the truck were gone. I sat down on the floor, my body shaking from the confrontation, and began to cry. I loved her, but I also hated her. I wanted to see her regret what she had done. As I sat there crying, I still wished she'd come back and beg for forgiveness, even though I knew I could never trust her again. The next month was full of divorce stuff, lawyers, splitting money, and deciding who gets what. At work, my team supported me. Colleen helped me find a psychologist. I saw him twice a week to work through my feelings. I moved into a short-term apartment. It was good because I couldn't stay in the house. Colleen helped clean up the house and got it repaired. Even though Jillian initially said she wanted a clean break, she ended up fighting over a lot, starting with our bank accounts. We only had $20,000 split between 3 accounts, and she was saying over $15,000 of that was hers. Next, we had to deal with the house and the investment properties. When we got married, I already had the house we lived in. I had borrowed a bit too much for my business at the time, but it turned out to be a smart move. We paid off the extra loan quickly and even bought 2 more properties as investments. She helped with some of the work on these homes over the years, but all 3 houses were in a trust. Neither of us could directly benefit from them. She tried to fight this, likely with the help of her lover's money, but it didn't work. All these properties were out of her reach. I couldn't help but smile knowing she lost any gain from them. Next came the furniture and jewelry. Through my lawyer, I informed her that all her things were packed in boxes and delivered to her. I made a list that included shoes, earrings, and necklaces that were in the boxes I packed for her. My last thought was Jillian's claim on half my business. She believed she was owed half since we had been together right after I started it. Sally, my lawyer, firmly pointed out the terms of the prenup and told Jillian she got nothing from my business. In the end, she got $10,000. I guess she spent most of it on lawyers. I wasn't happy, but it did give me some satisfaction that she walked away with so little while I kept my houses and business worth much more. Sally also did something extra for me by getting Jillian to give up both her wedding and engagement rings. The restraining order was dropped since Jillian had no claim to the house. She couldn't get in anyway, as I changed the locks and hired a security company to check the house a couple of times each week before I moved back in. Once everything was decided, we had a couple of months to wait for the divorce to be final. I didn't hear much from Jillian. However, James and Sherry got a lot of questions from people at the reunion who they still talk to, and they both firmly told everyone to back off. James found out that Jillian and her lover were living in an apartment in town, provided by the company he worked for. He had a 6-month lease, and then he would have to either pay for it himself or find another place. It seemed he thought that by getting together with Jillian, he would have a house ready for him. Too bad for him. The next surprise came in August, a couple of weeks before the divorce was final. It was tax season in Australia, one of the busiest times for accountants. For small businesses, August and September are very hectic as they want to get their taxes done and get refunds sorted out quickly. We didn't handle many small business taxes, but over the years we had done some favors for friends. I was surprised when one of those businesses showed up on a Tuesday morning. I never thought I would see their faces again. Gregory, come on, man. You gotta help me out. Mark was pleading, sitting across the table in one of our meeting rooms. Lena was sitting beside him, looking down. Just from one glance, I could tell their relationship was tense, likely because of our last meeting. Why? I asked, enjoying their discomfort. James was sitting beside me. For the past few years, James and I had handled the taxes for Mark's import-export business. It was a complex process, making sure the correct filings were done and all revenue reductions were worked through. We got paid well for it, and Mark could go somewhere else, but it would cost him more, and it would take a few years for another accountant to get to know his business. Really? You're really going to make me beg Greg, Ori? Mark said, his voice pleading. I laughed. James smiled. Well, begging would be a nice touch, but it wouldn't work. What I am curious about is why you're here. I mean, all of you plan to embarrass me. You made excuses and didn't care about how I felt while you all praised Jillian and her lover, telling me to get over myself. Well, I have gotten over myself, and I decided that I want nothing to do with any of you. Can you believe that choice? No one said anything for a minute. You were right, you know, Lena said quietly when no one else spoke. I raised an eyebrow at her statement. Meaning? I asked. For a moment, Lena looked at Mark, her face showing anger, but then it changed to sadness. Mark looked down at his hand, saying nothing. About the strip club, the back room, you were right, she said sadly. The surprise must have shown on my face. When Mark bragged about it, I thought he was just exaggerating. When I told Lena what Mark had said, I did it to upset them. I didn't think it was true. Wow, really? So, Mark, you were telling the truth? I asked, a bit shocked at my former friend. He looked up at me for a moment before looking back down and nodding. I looked at Lena with a raised eyebrow. You were right, Gregory, and not just about Mark's behavior. She told James and me while Mark kept his head down. You were right about everything. We got so caught up in the romance that Troy and Jillian were selling to us that we never really thought about you. I went to reply, but Lena shook her head. For the first time, I held my tongue. That day, when you told us about Mark for a few seconds, I thought you were just trying to upset us. But then I saw the look in his eyes, and I knew you were telling the truth. You didn't know it was true, did you? Lena asked me. I shook my head and snorted. Figures. She paused, and then looked at me, and I was surprised to see sadness in her eyes, aimed at me. I think we all knew you would hurt Gregory. When he came back and others told us we knew it was wrong, but convinced ourselves it was true love. We lied to ourselves. Some people, like my husband, she said with regret, were easing their own guilty conscience by telling us you would be fine to hide their own cheating. I looked at the broken couple. Mark couldn't look us in the eyes, and Lena was about to cry. And now, I asked simply, Lena gave a bitter chuckle. Now, well, our past actions are catching up to us. We've hurt someone we loved, and my own marriage is barely holding on. I don't know if it will survive. I looked at Mark, who said nothing. I knew he was listening, but he couldn't lift his head. If they thought guilt would make me sorry for them, they were mistaken. I can't say I'm not pleased you're both hurting, I said softly. But as the head of other accounting, I've decided it's not good for this business to keep looking after your company. I watched Mark's shoulders slump. However, I continued. Mark looked up at me with hope. I can recommend 3 firms that might take your account. James here has a list of their details. James slid a piece of paper across the table. If you're interested, let James know and we can send your past financial records to any of them. The hope in Mark's eyes faded. That's it, Mark asked. A recommendation? You're really done with us? Yes, I replied, shrugging. You chose to betray me by supporting Jillian and that guy, using terms like true love and meant to be together without regret. You even laughed about it. Actions have consequences. You mess with my life. I mess with yours. With that, I got up and walked out of the room without saying goodbye. Later, James came in and told me they had chosen someone, and he would hand over the details once Mark and Lena signed the forms. The same scene repeated 3 more times over the next month with clients who supported Jillian in her betrayal. It was clear I wouldn't work with them anymore. Unexpectedly, although I lost 4 clients, I gained another 6. These were people who didn't support what happened and wanted to help me. Other accounting didn't need the extra work, but I didn't say no. August turned into September, and the final divorce papers came through. By then, I had moved back into my remodeled house. My arms were fully healed and no longer itching. I missed looking tough, but I didn't miss the itchy bandages. The day I got the paperwork, I missed a call from Jillian that I never returned. She had also sent a text. Goodbye, Gregory. I'm sorry. I didn't know how to feel. Did she regret what she had done? The pain of betrayal had eased a bit over the month since the incident at the club. I was still angry and upset, but I had a logical mind. If Jillian could so easily have an affair and leave me, then she wasn't right for me. That weekend, Colleen and several colleagues from work came to my place uninvited for a friends and family barbecue. I was surprised, but I must have hugged over 24 people that Saturday afternoon. I only got to meet about a third of the people there. All afternoon, I was never alone. Someone was always there, be it Colleen, James, Sherry, or a dozen other staff. At one point, I was sitting with a drink while James manned the barbecue. Sherry sat with me, and I almost cried, watching a group of kids play touch football in my backyard. Jillian and I had talked about having kids for years, and watching the kids hit me hard. I felt a soft kiss on my cheek and gave Sherry a surprised look as she sat back down beside me. She held my hand and touched my cheek. "I understand, Greg, but there will be life again. Don't close yourself off. This afternoon you have many people here to support you. Friends, colleagues, family, everyone knows we are here for you. It wasn't fair what they did. They hurt James and me too, but that was only a side effect. We need you to know we are here for you." Sherry hugged me for a few minutes as I cried. Then I felt a hand on my shoulder, and James was there, looking kind. This was followed by a hug from Colleen and several other staff. I felt eyes on me or soft touches letting me know I had support. I was a wreck for most of the afternoon, but I never felt awkward. The following week at work, I felt much better. Staff noticed me smiling and even joking, something I hadn't done for a long time. During the weekly staff meeting, I thanked everyone for coming and helping, especially James, Colleen, and Sherry. Sherry had shown me there as life after betrayal. That week we got 3 new clients, including 2 big companies. It seemed one of our old clients had recommended us. These companies needed a thorough financial review, and we got chosen for the job. We divided the work, and for the first time since Jillian left me, I joined the team on a forensic audit. It was good work with a 3-month deadline, so we got started. In the evenings, I started a routine of cooking dinner and staying fit. I knew I could either drown myself in work or worse in alcohol, but I wanted to rise above the betrayal and find life again. Thanks to Colleen and the team, I had hoped for more than just being another divorce statistic. It was a quiet Thursday evening, 2 weeks after the barbecue. I was making lamb cutlets and noke with an apple mustard sauce when the doorbell rang. I laid the tea towel on the table and walked to the door. Opening the door, I was shocked. A beautiful blonde woman, a little over 5 feet tall, stood there looking nervous. Before I could greet her, she stepped in, grabbed my shirt, and kissed me. For a moment I was stunned, but her lips were soft and I tasted mint on her breath. Without thinking, I kissed her back. Her arms went around my waist and I pulled her closer, our lips not parting. It could have been 30 seconds or 30 minutes, I didn't know, but it felt amazing. As we pulled apart, I saw tears in her eyes. Before I could ask her anything, she slapped me. It wasn't hard, but it was still a slap. I stood there shocked. Her face was sad, but also full of compassion. "I'm sorry, Gregory. That wasn't a great way to say hello," she said. Her voice was soft but firm. I looked at her, puzzled. Sure," I said. Not knowing what else to say, she smiled. "Rebecca," she said. "Rebecca," I repeated. We stood there in silence for a moment. "So, Rebecca," I said, "what brings you here this evening?" She smiled a bit shyly. "You," she said. "I suppose your greeting made that clear, but why are you here to see me?" I asked, a slight smile forming on my lips. "Because you need me to be here," she replied, smiling too. "Really?" I asked. "Why do I need you? I mean, I enjoyed the kiss, but then you slapped me. I'm confused." Now I saw happiness in her eyes. "You think I'm beautiful?" she asked. I nodded. Yes, and gorgeous. Her smile widened, and I felt drawn to her even more. "Thank you, Gregory," she said, blushing. She wore a dark blue sundress that contrasted with her blonde hair. Her high cheekbones, large blue eyes, and cute nose made her very attractive. "Something smells nice?" she said, sniffing the air. I sighed contently and invited her inside. I was curious about what she wanted. We chatted a bit as I guided her to the kitchen. I poured her a glass of Shiraz. She watched me without drinking it. I quickly prepared a second plate of dinner for her. I set the table, dimmed the lights, and we both laughed a little. "Our first date and you ordered for me?" she joked. "Well, a woman likes a man who knows what she wants," I teased back. Rebecca laughed and then raised her glass. To Gregory, showing grace even when wounded, she toasted. We clinked glasses and took a sip. I watched as she tried the food. Her eyes went wide. "Gregory, this is amazing," she said. I nodded and tasted it too. It was good. We both enjoyed the meal. "So, Rebecca, no more games. Who are you, and what's happening here?" I asked. She took another bite and another sip of wine before she spoke. "First off, thank you, Gregory. There were many ways you could have reacted, and you handled it with grace." I was outside your door for almost 20 minutes before I knocked. I nodded and took a sip of my wine. "We've met a few times before. I'm Colleen's niece." She paused, letting that sink in. Finally, I got it. "Oh, Rebecca, sorry, you look very different now," I said. She smiled, but it was a sad smile, an old pain behind it. I remembered Rebecca. She used to look so different. Back then, she was in a goth phase, following a boy Colleen said was trouble. When we first met, her hair was jet black. She had many piercings, and she wore a lot of pale makeup with dark clothes and boots. "I was going through a bad time," she said, still smiling. "It was right after I broke up with my boyfriend. I didn't know who I was and felt lost. Aunt Colleen brought me to the office after talking with my mom to give me a fresh start." I nodded, remembering. She came to the office a few times that month, always dressed in black. Her blonde hair was dyed black. She wore black lipstick and eyeliner and had lots of piercings. "He was cheating on me with 2 girls and a guy," she said, snapping me out of my thoughts. I nearly choked on my wine. "What?" I exclaimed. "Yeah," she said, looking down at her wine glass. "We were at a club high and went back to the guy's place. I went to the bathroom, and when I came back, he was with one of the girls and the guy. I looked at her, shocked. Even high, I freaked out. I'm loyal to one person. I understand bisexual attraction, but I'm not like that. I don't do groups," she said, looking at me again. "Neither do I," said. She seemed to relax a bit. "Anyway," Rebecca continued, "I ran out and went home crying for 3 days. After a week, Mom got me to go out with Aunt Colleen, and that's when she brought me to the office and I met you." I smiled. "I remember meeting you," she said, smiling shyly. "Aunt Colleen introduced us and you shook my hand. You didn't look at me like a sad goth girl who got betrayed. You didn't judge how I looked. Do you remember what you asked me?" I nodded. "I asked you what kind of coffee you wanted." Rebecca smiled. "Yes, double-shot mocha with extra chocolate." We both said at the same time. We laughed. "You do remember," Rebecca beamed. I nodded and took another sip of wine. Her smile faded. "The slap was because I was at the barbecue the other day and you didn't see me," she said, looking me in the eyes. "I'm sorry, Rebecca." "It was a hard day," I said. She gave a small smile. "It's okay, Gregory. I knew you were having a tough day. I just imagined kissing you and slapping you because you didn't see me. I even hugged you and said everything would be all right, but I guess everyone was doing that and you don't remember much." I thought for a moment. I remembered someone with hands on my chest, wearing dark blue jeans and a red blouse saying things would be fine. "You remember?" she asked. "A little," I said. "Red top, blue jeans." Rebecca smiled and nodded. "I spoke to Aunt Colleen and asked about you." Rebecca blushed a bit. "She knows I have a crush on you, and I think she saw me hug you at the barbecue. She encouraged me to talk to you." I chuckled. "Did you plan to kiss me?" "No." Rebecca blushed more. "I wasn't sure if I could do it, but when you opened the door, I just went for it." I reached out and held her hand. "I'm glad you did. It was the best thing to happen to me in months." Rebecca smiled, and we talked for the next 3 hours. She helped me clean up dinner, and then we continued our chat with a small glass of port in the lounge. I learned she was 28, almost 4 years younger than me. She had just finished a finance degree. She liked various music, but hated death metal after leaving her goth phase. Rebecca had a junior accounting job at a manufacturing firm in their accounts receivable department, and mostly enjoyed it. She was close to her family. Her parents had been married for 30 years, and she hoped they'd be around for another 30. She had a younger sister living in New Zealand, and they spoke about once a month. Rebecca liked going to the beach, but had sensitive skin, so she stayed out of the water. She had only had 2 boyfriends, including the boy who betrayed her, and felt sad about losing her virginity to him. We shared stories about our lives. I told her about being estranged from my mom after my dad suddenly. I had a younger sister, but we didn't talk because she caused a family rift with a misunderstood comment. It was nearly 1 in the morning when she left. I think we both wanted her to stay over, but she decided we should get to know each other better first. When she left, she gave me another warm kiss. As I crawled into bed, I fell asleep with a smile on my face. I hadn't felt this happy since my life fell apart. Rebecca, with her wild actions, broke through the walls of pain I had built. That kiss made me realize that maybe someone could care for me romantically, and I was open to that. The next morning, my smile was impossible to hide, and everyone noticed. By lunchtime, Colleen cornered me. "Okay, spill it, Greg. Who is she?" Colleen asked, looking hopeful. "Rebecca came by last night," I told her. Colleen's happy scream could be heard throughout the office. She jumped a couple of times, clasping her hands to her chest and smiling brightly. Colleen took me to the kitchen and made me tell her everything. She laughed when I mentioned the kiss and the slap. She swayed happily as I talked about dinner and how we chatted until 1 in the morning. "Greg, I am so happy for you. Even if nothing comes of it, it's great to see you moving on from what Jillian and that jerk did to you." She then gave me a cheeky smile. "But you and Becca, I think there's something there. I've thought that for a while." We talked for a few more minutes, and Colleen asked if I was going to see Rebecca again. I told her we had been texting all day and planned to have dinner on Friday night. Colleen was cheerfully excited for the rest of the afternoon, and her mood spread to everyone else. Friday night came, and I drove to pick up Rebecca. I told her to dress up a bit as I wanted our first formal date to be special. She didn't disappoint. I knocked on her apartment door and she took my breath away. Rebecca wore a stunning little black dress with thin straps. Her long blonde hair was tied back and she had a matching black shawl over her shoulders and a black clutch in her hands. My eyes traveled down her body to her toned calves and modest heels. She smiled, turned around, showing off, and laughed. "Wow, I'm doing great so far," she laughed. "Every time we meet, you can't say hello." Before she could say anything else, I stepped forward and pulled her close. I looked into her eyes for a moment, then gently kissed her lips, trying not to mess up her makeup. "Hello, beautiful," I said as I broke the kiss. And none," Rebecca said, eyes closed. I laughed. She opened her eyes and smiled. We walked hand in hand to my car. As I opened the door, Rebecca stopped and stared. "This is your car?" she asked. "Yes," I said. Rebecca's jaw dropped. "Iona, 1967, Mustang GT, a classic with gray and black racing stripes and a modified exhaust. I was surprised Jillian didn't try to get it during the divorce since it's my pride and joy. I only bring it out for special occasions." I opened the passenger door for Rebecca. She smiled as she slid into the seat. When I started the car, Rebecca giggled as the V8 engine vibrated through the car. We drove into town, talking about our weeks at work and how Colleen had high hopes for us. We had dinner at a fancy Japanese restaurant. We tried many dishes and had a bit of sake, though it's not really our thing. After dinner, we went to the casino. We placed a few bets and walked away with over $600 more than what we started with. The casino also had a club, so we headed in, all dressed up. It was a fancy place with lots of people looking for a good time. We danced a lot, and I loved it when Rebecca spun around and danced close to me while holding my hands. The kisses I got throughout the night were a bonus, too. A few times, guys asked her to dance. She looked amazing, but she politely said no every time. Once, when I was returning from the bar with our drinks, a guy stopped me, placing a hand on my shoulder. "You're one lucky guy. I hope you know that," he said, seeing my confused look. "Your woman, she's really beautiful and only has eyes for you. No offense, but I just asked her to dance while you were at the bar and she turned me down flat. I mean, me getting turned down. The guy was good-looking, likely a personal trainer or athlete. He probably had charmed many women before, but Rebecca wasn't interested. He patted my shoulder, smiled, and walked away. Saturday morning, I woke up slowly, a smile on my face as I remembered the wonderful evening I had spent with Rebecca. The morning sun peeked through the blinds, gently waking me up. I lay there thinking about last night's dinner, dancing, and those deep conversations that made me feel so connected. I remembered dropping her off with a warm kiss. Wait, not dropping her off. Fully awake now, I turned over and saw her. Rebecca was lying there, eyes closed, breathing softly. I remembered how, without needing any words, we both came back to my place. She followed me to the bedroom, took off her dress, and got into bed with me. If you're going to stare at me like that, you better follow it up with action, buddy, Rebecca said lazily. Her eyes remained shut, but a big smile spread across her lips. I smiled back, pulling her clothes under the covers. Her warmth pressed against me, and it felt like our bodies just fit together perfectly. As we kissed, I felt a rush of feelings. It was like the very first time we met, full of passion and connection. "Rebecca," I asked as we paused to catch our breath. "Mm-hmm," she responded, still lost in the moment. "Rebecca," I said again. She opened her eyes and looked at me. I saw desire, but there was something else, too. Was it love? For a moment she stayed sleepy, but she must have sensed my tone. "Gregory, are you all right?" she asked, sounding concerned. "If you're worried we didn't do anything, just kiss and slept." I propped myself up on one shoulder, turning to face her. "Rebecca," I started, then hesitated. She said nothing, just adjusted herself, letting the sheet slip for a moment. Then she quickly pulled it back up, waiting for me to continue. "I'm scared," I admitted. "What Jillian did to me hurt a lot. It made me feel like I was never good enough, like I failed." Rebecca nodded quietly, giving me space to go on. I felt so many things over the past year. Pain, anger, sadness. "But now I'm scared not because of Jillian, but because of you," I said. Rebecca reached out and cupped my cheek. Her touch was so gentle it almost made me cry. "I understand, Gregory. Jillian hurt you deeply," Rebecca said softly but firmly. "You put yourself out there, tried to connect with her, and got rejected." I nodded and took a deep breath. "I'm scared, Becca, because I think I'm falling in love with you. I feel broken. What if I can't give you what you need?" In an unexpected move, she pulled me into a hug, my head resting on her chest. "Shh, don't worry about that," she said soothingly. "I see your pain and I want to help you heal. Just give me what love you can. Don't hold back." I lifted my head to meet her gaze. We looked deeply into each other's eyes, and moments later our lips met in a passionate kiss. My hands roamed her body, exploring every curve. We both found comfort and pleasure in each other. The intimacy grew as our touches deepened, but this time it wasn't just about physical connection. It was about healing and understanding. Rebecca and I found solace in each other's arms. The love and care we shared that morning spoke louder than words. We let go of our fears, at least for a while, and embraced the moment. As we lay there, close and connected, I felt a new kind of hope blooming inside me. It had been a few weeks since I'd last been with someone. Watching videos and using my hand wasn't the same as having a real partner. I felt movement beside me. Expecting Rebecca to grab a tissue, I was surprised to see her holding her phone. "Smile, baby," Rebecca said, taking a selfie. My stuff was all over her face as she rested her head on my shoulder. "But Rebecca," I asked, "relax. I have a secure app on my phone. Only we will see these. I want you to know no one has ever done this to me before, and I've never taken a photo like this." A moment later, my phone buzzed with a message. Rebecca had sent me the photo. "Greg, I trust you," she said. I got up briefly and grabbed a wet washcloth from the bathroom next to my bedroom. I came back to Rebecca, who was very happy, and helped clean her face before kissing her. "Greg, baby." I smiled, knowing it was her turn. I started kissing down her neck. For the first time, I really took a good look at my new girlfriend. Rebecca had a slim body. Her breasts were a nice size, not too big. Her nipples were very small but stood out, and they were very sensitive. I quickly found out that if I gave her breasts the right attention, she could reach climax before I even went lower. Speaking of lower, wow, she didn't hit the gym all the time, but she loved running, and it showed in her perfectly shaped bottom. It was smooth and round. I knew I wanted her all to myself forever. I pulled down her black satin panties and noticed she was waxed smooth, not a single hair. Rebecca smiled and spread her legs a bit, teasing me. Much like when she looked at me, I felt excited to please her. From the moment my tongue touched her, Rebecca started making happy sounds. I kept going gently but steadily and brought her to climax 5 times in the next 15 minutes. During that, I grabbed her bottom and, by accident, I touched a spot that made her moan louder. "Greg," Rebecca said after her 5th climax. I looked up at her smiling as she calmed down. "Take me," she said simply. I moved up her body and gently entered her. Rebecca wrapped her legs around me, pulling me in deep. Both of us made sounds of pleasure as our bodies connected, and soon our lips met in a deep kiss. We started slow, but we made love for almost an hour. We didn't talk much, letting our bodies do the talking. After covered in sweat and such, we cuddled. "Thank you," I told her. I felt her smile. "You're welcome, baby. Are you okay?" "Better," I replied. "You gave me a gift today. You made me feel like a man again." She tightened her hold on me. "Yes, but now you belong to me. No one else will have you." That weekend, we didn't leave the bed except to shower or get food from the kitchen. We stayed undressed until Monday morning when it was time for work. I had to drive Rebecca back to her place wearing her dress from Friday night. She wasn't wearing underwear, which excited me. By the time I got to the office, I had another 2 pictures of my naked girlfriend. In the second one, she had written Gregory's on her stomach. That week, Rebecca stayed at my place every night except Wednesday when she had to work late. It was easier for her to stay at her place that night. In my office, Colleen never pressed, but seemed to know her niece and I were together. I never came out and said it, but I'm sure Colleen knew we were more than just friends. "Hey, Greg," James said one Tuesday after the coffee run, "you got a few minutes?" He didn't wait for my reply, but closed the door. "Sure," I said, raising an eyebrow. I sensed he wanted to talk about something serious, probably about Jillian. "So, things are going well between you and Rebecca?" he asked. "Yeah," I grinned. "It's only been a few months, but it feels like we've been together for much longer." "I get that. Sherry and I have been together just under 5 years, but it feels like 10. James looked worried for a moment. But not in a bad way. I mean, I can't imagine life without her." I held up my hand and chuckled. "I get it, James. It's not a bad thing." He nodded. "Sherry and I are glad to see you happy again. We were wondering if you and Rebecca would join us for dinner Saturday night at our place." There was a hint of hope in his voice. "I don't think we have any plans, but I'll double-check with Becca." He nodded. Greg?" James said, leading into the real reason he closed the door. I sighed. "Jillian?" "Kind of," James said. "You know the Kensington audit we're doing?" he asked. I nodded. Of the 2 big companies we'd taken on, Kensington was one of them. James was at his desk looking through financial records. "We found some problems and I need your guidance." He said to me, "Okay, show me what you have," I replied. James spread out several reports. They showed that one of our middle managers seemed to be stealing money from the company. He used the stolen money for things like drugs and paying a woman in child in another country. According to the audit, he had been doing this for many years. He was smart and hid the theft by spreading it across different cost centers and projects. He never took the same amount and used various bank accounts. Over time, he stole nearly $2 million. I leaned back trying to process it all. My mind was blown. "So let me get this right." I said to James, "For over 4 years he's used company money for drugs and other shady stuff. Then for the last 3 years he's been making child support payments with company money to a woman and child overseas." James nodded. "Pretty much." "Wow," I said, trying not to smile. "So much for true love." James chuckled. A month later, we gave an initial report to Kensington but kept the specifics until we finished tracing the files. They were worried about the fraud and agreed they needed to know more before taking action. We asked for another month and they agreed. 2 weeks later, on a Friday night, I came home. Becca had let herself in and set up a candle like dinner. She had poured me a Kraken and Coke and a glass of red wine for herself. As we ate chicken baskeloa, I noticed a box between us. It didn't dominate the conversation, but I knew Rebecca was aware it was on my mind. After dinner, we refilled our drinks and went to the lounge. Rebecca had dimmed the lights and played soft music through a Bluetooth speaker. "Greg, these last 6 months have been the best of my life," she said. I started to respond, but she raised her hand. "I just want to say this," she smiled. "I know you were heartbroken when we met, and so was I. I had some strange experiences in my past, and our relationship is better than anything I imagined because we give our all to each other. I love spending time with you, and I can't wait to come home to you after work. I told you I had a crush on you from the day we met in your office, and that's true. But I love you, Gregory. I need you to know that as you open the box." Rebecca set her glass down and handed me the box. She watched me expectantly. The box was small, like one for headphones from Amazon. It wasn't sealed. I took the top off and found another box inside. On top of that box was an envelope. I picked up the envelope and looked at Rebecca. She looked nervous but nodded as I unfolded the letter inside. Gregory, inside this box is the engagement ring you bought last week. I found it last week and while cleaning and you were in the shower. I really hope you'll open the box, take out the ring and ask me to marry you. I love you so much. Yours forever, Rebecca Brown. P.S. I love you. I love you. I love you. I looked back at Rebecca, who had hope written all over her face. I mouthed, I love you too, and opened the second box. Inside, surrounded by tissue paper, was the engagement ring box I had bought. It held a simple gold band with a single diamond. I smiled at Rebecca and took out the ring box. I never looked inside the ring box. Rebecca said I wanted to, but I didn't. I nodded and got down on my knees in front of her. Even though she had hurried this moment, she gasped but smiled. Rebecca Brown, since the moment you came into my life, you have chased me and lifted me up. You made me feel alive again. Before you kissed me that first time, I thought I'd never see the light again. When we first woke up together, you showed me how much you wanted to be with me. In all the world, I can't imagine a more beautiful woman or a better partner. You always surprised me and never disappoint. I had planned to do this in a couple of weeks at your family barbecue. I don't think either of us can let this moment pass by. I opened the ring box. Rebecca Beth Brown, will you marry me? I asked. Before I even finished speaking, she knelt in front of me and shouted, Yes! She held out her hand, and I slid the ring onto her finger. Then she kissed me passionately. Thank you, my fiancé, I said. Oh, you are going to have the most loving wife, and wait until we have kids. I can't wait for you to be a dad. Just then, the doorbell rang, and I had to step away from Rebecca to answer it. I opened the door to find Colleen, Rebecca's parents, James, and Sherry. Congratulations! They all shouted. I felt someone's arms wrap around my waist. Sorry, but I wanted to celebrate our engagement, so I invited some people over, Rebecca said. We welcomed everyone in, her parents bringing bottles of champagne. As glasses were handed out, I tried to act surprised, but I couldn't help smiling. Rebecca proudly showed her ring to the ladies, while James and my future father-in-law patted my back. We spent the evening laughing and sharing stories from our childhoods. Later that night, early in the morning actually, everyone left, and Rebecca and I went to bed. Before we fell asleep, she asked me to take a few more pictures of her with her engagement ring. About a month later, 3 major things happened within 2 days. First, we completed a forensic audit for Kensington. When we presented the report, they were very unhappy. It was clear that heads would roll and the authorities would likely get involved. That same afternoon, Rebecca came to my office with some paperwork and wedding ideas. As I read through the legal documents she brought, I got upset. Becca, you can't be serious about this document, I said. Why? It should make you feel secure about our marriage, she replied. Your house, your business, everything will be protected. I know, but this prenuptial agreement is unfair to you. It leaves you with almost nothing. No, it only leaves me with nothing if I cheat on you, which I will never do, she said. In all other cases, everything is split evenly and your business stays safe. Becca, I know you're trying to show me how much you love me, but my current protections are enough. Rebecca held up her hand. I know, Greg. Trust me, this is my promise to you. The only way I walk away with nothing is if I cheat on you, and that will never happen. I signed the document. I trust you, Becca. Thank you. We'll put this away and never need it. The rest of the afternoon, we discussed the document a bit more, but in the end, it went into a drawer to gather dust. The third thing happened the next evening at home. Rebecca, having moved in, told me to take a shower. As I was getting out, I heard yelling. I quickly put on some shorts and rushed to the entryway. So I move out, and he just moves on to some other woman. My ex-wife shouted at Rebecca. Rebecca laughed. You left him breaking his heart, and I'm not just any woman, she said, using her fingers to make quotes. I stayed out of sight, listening. But yes, I am Gregory's woman. He gets all of my love. Can you say the same when you were with him? Rebecca replied to my ex. How dare you? Jillian shouted, and I heard a slap. That was my cue. I stepped into the room. Both women turned to me, Jillian with a red mark on her cheek. I chuckled. Rebecca, I said with a smile. Meet Jillian, my ex-wife. Jillian, meet Rebecca, my fiancée. Both women glared at each other until I stepped between them. Do you find this funny, Greg? Jillian asked. Actually, I paused. Yes, I do. You weren't invited. You yelled at my fiancé and got slapped. It's a little karma for how things ended between us, Rebecca sneered at Jillian, but I raised my hand to stop her. Enough, Becca. She stepped back, still glaring at my ex. What do you want, Jillian? I sighed. Why did you do it, Greg? Why did you ruin my life? She asked, her anger now directed at me. What do you mean, Jillian? I replied, trying to sound innocent. I haven't been involved in your life for almost a year. If I remember right, you left me for true love and didn't care about the consequences. Behind me, Rebecca snorted. Jillian shot an angry look at Rebecca, then turned back to me. You didn't have to ruin Troy, she said, her voice a bit sad. I laughed, making Jillian turn pale. You'll have to be more specific, Jillian, I told her, crossing my arms. Rebecca wrapped her arms around my waist. It was your company that did the audit on Kensington. Your report got Troy arrested. You didn't have to do that, Jillian said, her voice softer. Should I ignore it when someone steals over $2 million for drugs and other bad things? I asked. Drugs? Other bad things? Jillian went white. A woman and child? Clearly she didn't know the whole truth. I leaned forward. Yes, Jillian. The true love you left me for has a woman and child in the States. He stole company money for drugs and other bad things. It's all in the report. I can send it to you if you want. She sank to the ground, her world falling apart. For the first time, she looked lost. Rebecca and I watched as she slumped to the ground on the porch. He's been arrested, you know, Jillian said, her anger gone, her voice empty. I didn't know Troy was arrested, but I figured it would happen soon. We've been married less than 3 months, and he's been away for a whole month, Jillian told us. As we watched, Jillian started crying. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a bit sorry for her. We were married for years. We shared dreams and moments, but she hurt me deeply. I couldn't just be kind to her anymore. What do I do, Greg? Jillian asked at one point, looking up at Rebecca and me. Rebecca answered for me. You have a lot of nerve asking that after what you did to him, Rebecca said firmly, but without anger. Some of Jillian's spirit came back. He was mine long before he was yours, Jillian retorted. Rebecca laughed, holding me tighter. He was never really yours, Jillian. You never let him fully into your heart. You didn't give yourself to him completely. If you had, you wouldn't have done what you did. That's not true, Jillian protested, shaking her head and looking at me. I just stood there watching. I did give myself to Greg fully when we were married. Rebecca laughed. Sure, that's why as soon as your true love came back, you cheated on Greg. You humiliated him and tried to take his house, investments, and even his business, right? That's really giving yourself to someone. For a moment, Jillian said nothing. She looked like she might disappear. She was finally realizing what she'd done and what she lost. Rebecca let go of me and sat down beside Jillian in a surprising act of kindness. Jillian, Rebecca said softly, you don't know my story. The first time I met Greg, I wasn't in a good place. He was happily married to you, and I could tell how much he loved you just from our short talks. I heard more about him over time, and I was jealous of you. Jillian looked surprised. Rebecca continued, and I leaned against the door, arms still crossed. When I heard what you did, I was so angry. I wanted to make you see what you were giving up. Jillian nodded slowly, staring at the concrete. But then, Rebecca said, looking at me with a smile, I went to a barbecue for Greg the weekend your divorce became final. Jillian looked at me, pain in her eyes. I stayed calm, wondering where Rebecca was going with this. He was in a daze. Even Aunt Colleen couldn't get through to him. Jillian looked at Rebecca, surprised. Rebecca continued, Yes, Colleen is my aunt. Anyway, Greg was broken. You left him, broke the marriage, and he was close to depression or worse. The kind man who comforted me years before was gone. My heart broke for him. Both women looked at me then, Rebecca with love, Jillian with sorrow. Throughout the evening, everyone tried to comfort him. He cried openly in front of all of us. He didn't hide his pain from what you did, Rebecca said. I think almost everyone at the barbecue hugged him that night, including me. Rebecca smiled at me again. Jillian pulled her knees to her chest and hugged her legs, still looking at me as Rebecca told her story. After I hugged Greg, he doesn't remember it, but he said, Thank you. Right then, I knew I could help him. I knew I could stop him from becoming bitter. I felt a spark in my heart to be with Greg and rebuild from the mess you left. For a moment, no one spoke. The next week, I came over here, and when he opened the door, Rebecca said, grinning like me. I gave him a big kiss. Then I slapped him. Jillian's eyes went wide. She looked at Rebecca, then back at me. Rebecca and I smiled at each other, both remembering that moment. That was it, Jillian. Rebecca continued. From that moment, I was his, totally and completely. In my heart, there will never be another man I will love as much as Greg. The thought of doing what you did to him makes me feel sick. You threw away someone who would have given you the world, and for that I thank you. He owns my heart now, and if you hadn't let him go, I would never have had my chance. Again, no one said anything for a minute, each lost in their own thoughts. How can you say that? Jillian asked Rebecca, looking down at the floor. How can you say he owns you? What about your past relationships? Past loves? Rebecca laughed. Jillian, my past relationships were a little messy. Even now, Greg enjoys some of the playful moments in our relationship. As my fiancé said that, Jillian looked at us. Rebecca saw a chance. Did you ever let Greg be close to you? Rebecca asked. Did you dress up for him? Make him excited? Did you ever come home early and surprise him? Make him feel special? Jillian flinched a little at Rebecca's direct comments. Rebecca was enjoying it. And you know Greg knows how to love. He has great energy, and Jillian, you remember how he can make you feel special. Why would I not want to give everything to him? Look, she paused and pulled out her phone. I watched Jillian's eyes widen as she saw Rebecca show private photos of us being happy. This, Rebecca said, holding the phone up for Jillian to see, was me showing Greg that I am his woman. He is my man, and I am his woman. Jillian was breathing heavily, her face flushed with embarrassment and another emotion. Rebecca continued, You ask how I can do these things. My answer is simple. For me, it's the best way to show my love for Greg. Rebecca put away her phone. Jillian slumped back against the wall behind her, defeated. What do I do now? She asked. I gave up everything for a dream. Rebecca shrugged. Honestly, I don't care what you do. Jillian looked at her surprised. I'm just letting you know what you lost and that I'm not letting you back into Greg's life. He is mine, and if you try anything, well, I can be very protective of my happiness. Rebecca then got up and walked back to my side. I found my voice. Jillian. My ex looked at me, defeated. Rebecca is right. She belongs to me and I belong to her. We're getting married, going to have kids, and hopefully love each other forever. For my part, I don't love you anymore. I remember that I once did, but between your betrayal and Becca in my life, there is no love left for you. If Jillian could look any more broken, I'm not sure how it would look. And if I'm honest, I said, I don't really like you. You hurt me like no one else has, but I do remember loving you. So with that, I will give you some advice. Jillian then looked up at me. Divorce Troy, I said. Leave him now before things get worse. He's going away for a long time for what he did. Where will I go? She asked. I shrugged. I don't care. Maybe Mark and Lena will let you stay with them. They're getting divorced, Jillian said sadly. I snorted, not surprised. Cheating will do that. Look, Jillian, you need to figure that out for yourself. I'm not going to be there for you. I'm not your friend. We're just two people who had something for a while. Is that how you really feel? No chance to be friends? Jillian said hopefully. No, both Rebecca and I said together. With that, Jillian stood up and shook her head sadly. She looked at Rebecca and me standing arm in arm. Jillian sighed. If nothing else, thank you for your honesty. I wish we could have stayed friends. I hoped in the beginning, but I see now it was all a dream. She stopped and shook her head again. Thank you. No one else has been honest with me. Take care of each other. I hope you have a happy life together. With that, she walked to her car, got in, gave us both a sad look, and drove away. In the next month, more news about Troy's arrest came out. Our checkup on the company showed the fraud and got mentioned in the newspapers. Because of this, we had to almost double our staff by the end of the year due to the high demand for our services. Rebecca and I got married in a small ceremony with our friends and family. We went to North Queensland for our honeymoon, spending 2 relaxing weeks on the sunny beaches. When we came back, we settled into a routine of working, being close, and dreaming about our future together. We talked about having kids. Rebecca decided to stop taking birth control, and we agreed to see what would happen naturally. A month after we started trying, Rebecca called me while I was on my way home to check if I was close. I told her yes, but when I got home, the house was very quiet. As I entered the house, I couldn't hear anything. It was strangely quiet. I put my bag down on a chair and called out for Rebecca, but got no answer. I started to worry a bit. She had just called me not 10 minutes ago saying she was at home. Her car was in the garage, so where was she? I walked through the house calling for her. I stopped when I entered the bedroom. My wife was there, but the reason she didn't answer my call was that she couldn't. As I walked in, Rebecca turned her head to listen, but she couldn't see me because she was wearing a blindfold. She couldn't talk because of the gag in her mouth, and she couldn't move because her arms and legs were tied to the bed. On a small table in front of the bed were a feather, some massage oils, lotion, whipped cream, chocolate dip, and a letter. I picked up the letter and read it. Gregory, my love, as you read this and see me like this, I give myself to you again. I can't move, talk, or see you, but I will feel you, hear you, and enjoy everything you do. Love me and take care of me. I'm yours forever. Love, Rebecca. I put the letter down and looked at her, feeling excited as I started to undress. Rebecca was listening, her body showing signs of anticipation. My wife had a bit of a fun side to her, but she saved it for me. Leaning on the bed, I gently kissed her neck above the gag. She made a happy sound. I laughed and squeezed one of her hands, making her moan more. I took off my clothes. Then I grabbed the feather and spent some time touching and teasing her. The smell of her skin was so tempting, so I moved on to the cream and chocolate, enjoying the fun while slowly caressing her body. After a while, I took off her gag and climbed over her. I put some whipped cream into her mouth before gently placing my lips on hers. Rebecca moaned as she reacted to me. She wanted more, but her bindings held her in place. As she embraced the moment, I leaned down and softly kissed her. Rebecca sighed with happiness. A while later, I felt the strong need to be closer to her. I got between her legs and moved gently inside her, feeling comfortable and at home. I knew I wouldn't last long, and she seemed to know it too. Just before the final moment, I smiled and pulled away. No, she moaned, feeling me leave her. She clearly wanted me closer. Smiling at the last second, I came back to her, and moments later I felt a rush of joy. I lay on top of my wife and kissed her. I took off her blindfold and saw her eyes filled with pure love. I love you, Gregory, she said softly. I love you too, Rebecca, I replied. I untied her hands and feet. She showed me how she had tied herself up, keeping one hand free until she knew I was almost home. We cuddled for a bit before Rebecca asked for more closeness. As we fell asleep after a shower and changing the bed sheets, I felt a level of happiness I had not known before. Sarah was born 9 months later, followed by the twins, Henry and Peter, a little under 2 years after that. Finally, our baby Bridget was born. After Bridget was born, Rebecca and I decided that 4 kids were enough, so I got a vasectomy. The years that followed were full of joy and surprises. Sure, we had the usual family problems and little fights, but our house was always filled with love, and that love stayed strong through the years. Epilogue, 32 years later. On a cold winter morning, the kids and I buried Rebecca. She fought cancer for 2 years. Until the end, Rebecca gave all she had to the kids and me. Even when she was weak, she wanted to spend as much time as possible with me, often reminding me that she needed to feel my love. Darling, Rebecca said in pain, but still clear because of the medicine. We were lying together in bed, holding each other close. You're going to be okay, you know? I'm not leaving you alone. I chuckled softly. I know we'll only be apart for a few years before I joined you, I said, stroking her now gray hair. Rebecca smiled, playing with my fingers. Remember that time in Canada? We both smiled, recalling how I had gotten stuck in a snowstorm just an hour away from the cabin where she was waiting. For almost 3 weeks, we could only talk on our phones. When I finally made it back, we spent another week enjoying each other's company. Yeah, like that, I said, both of us still smiling. Will you miss me? She asked. I chuckled again. Do you really need to ask? I will miss you with all my heart, I replied. We lay there together, comfortable and silent. A little while later, she squeezed my hand tightly. I'm scared, Rebecca said, her voice trembling. I know it's not long now. I feel my body shutting down. Her tears fell on my chest, and I felt my own tears starting. We had been married for over 30 years, had 4 kids, 6 grandkids, and 1 more on the way. We had traveled the world together, and now this. Shh, I whispered. I'll be here the whole time. I won't leave. I know, Rebecca replied. That gives me strength. We didn't talk for a few minutes. Greg? Rebecca asked. Yes, my love, I responded, kissing the top of her head. Hold me close one more time. I want my last memory to be of us together, she said quietly. I smiled and held her tightly for what would be the last time. The next day, the kids came with their families and we all sat with Rebecca. She was much weaker than the day before, and we knew her time was near as her skin lost its color. Throughout the day, we shared stories and laughed. We cried and sang songs in those final hours. The kids said their goodbyes and stood around the bed as I held my wife. I love you, I told her, feeling that our time together was almost over. Tears filled my eyes, and I love you, she said softly, her eyes starting to dim. These were Rebecca's last moments. Her frail hand reached up and lightly touched my cheek. We smiled at each other and she pulled me close for a kiss. For a moment, it felt like all the years melted away. In my arms, she felt like my young bride again. Without a wrinkle on her face, no cancer taking her away. Her eyes were bright, and her love for me was overwhelming. I felt her lips on mine as she took her last breath, giving me all her remaining strength. I stayed there, eyes closed, my tears falling as she passed. I cried, feeling like a part of me was gone forever. My family surrounded me and we wept together. Rebecca, my wife, and the mother of my children had been my true love. I knew I would never be the same without her, but I was also happy she was no longer in pain. Afterwards, even though she wasn't with me, I had daily reminders of our life together. We had our kids, and I saw them almost every weekend. James and Sherry often visited with their kids, too. No one let me be lonely. As the months went by, I was grateful for my family and friends. At night, if I felt lonely, I looked at photos and videos of our time together, always going to sleep with a smile. Not all the memories were romantic, but enough were that when I felt a bit lonely, I could still feel Rebecca's presence. Often I imagined her there with me, kissing me gently as I drifted off to sleep, comforted by our love, and the thought that we would be together again someday. About 6 months later, I was enjoying coffee on a Saturday morning at a local coffee shop when a shadow fell over me and then stopped. Gregory said a voice I hadn't heard in more than 30 years. "Jillian," I replied, recognizing the older version of a woman I once loved. I don't know why, but I pointed to the seat across from me. "Join me?" I asked. She hesitated for a moment, but then nodded and sat down. As she settled in, I noted the lines on her face, the tired look in her eyes, the freckles on her arms, and how thin she was. I hadn't kept up much with her life since that evening on my front porch, but from what I did know, it hadn't been easy. "How have you been?" I asked casually. "Oh, getting older. My body doesn't work like it used to. When I try to get up in the morning, I wonder if staying in bed might hurt less," she told me. I chuckled. I could relate. Jillian smiled, but then got sad. "I heard that Rebecca passed away." "I'm sorry, Greg," she said with genuine sadness. "Thank you," I told my ex-wife. "I miss her so much, but she's always in my heart and thoughts." I replied, smiling as I remembered Rebecca and our times at this very table, and I continued, taking a breath. "The kids never give me a moment's peace. Now that Becca is gone, they're determined to keep me busy and make sure someone is always looking after their old dad." Jillian smiled for a moment, then looked sad again. "How about you, any kids?" I asked, curious. She shook her head, staring at her coffee with regret. "I never had kids," Jillian said. "I was married 6 times before I realized nothing compared to my first marriage." Her smile was bitter. "I messed up badly, didn't I, Greg?" she asked, then raised her hand. "No, I know I did. I hurt you badly and spent a lot of time blaming you for Troy deceiving me. I thought each new man was the one, but no one measured up to you. I looked at the woman in front of me. I'd hated her for a long time, longer than I was angry at her. But now I saw a sad, broken woman who never had the chance to be in a real relationship with enough love and trust to have a child." "Jillian," I said, taking a breath. She looked at me, that same hope in her eyes from years ago. "I think you need to forgive yourself. 6 marriages? They couldn't all have been as bad as Troy. Surely some of those men were good guys." For a moment her eyes lost focus, a memory playing in her mind. "You're right, Barry. My 4th husband was a kind and gentle man. And you're also right. After that night with you and Rebecca, I never forgave myself for what I did to you. I wanted love, but I couldn't get over the hurt I caused you." She looked at me. I know I've said it before, but I'm sorry for what I did to you, Greg. Jillian spoke softly. Thank you, Jillian. I accept your apology. I replied, letting go. We both smiled. We spent the next few hours talking. I told her about my life with Rebecca, about the kids in our lives. Jillian told me about her hobbies and what she did now that she had retired after over 25 years working for local government in an admin job. Greg, do you think that she started hesitantly as we got up to leave? I smiled and shook my head. No, sorry, Jillian, I love my wife too much. Greg, I know you loved Rebecca, but she's gone. Surely there's nothing wrong. I raised my hand. Jillian, Becca, and I are only apart for a short time until we are together again. My love for her is as strong today as the day we met. I can't and won't betray her, I told her. My words seemed to hit deep. She nodded slowly. Friends, then? She asked. We'll see, Jillian. We'll see, I replied. I managed to live another 10 years before a stroke took me one Saturday afternoon after lunch. Sarah and Bridget were around, and we had just eaten when I sat down to watch TV. I was surprised it wasn't painful. My vision blurred, and I felt really tired. Then I closed my eyes. The next moment, I felt arms wrap around my waist and realized I was standing beside my body with Rebecca holding me. Becca, I asked. It's all right, baby. It's your time, she told me. The kids, I asked. They'll be fine, she said. You haven't noticed how much you've slowed down in the last month, but they have. They are ready. I nodded. This is real, isn't it? This isn't just my imagination, I asked my wife. She laughed, pulled me down and kissed me. If it is then, what a way to go kissing your wife until your last breath. I smiled. But no, this is real. Look, here come the girls, Rebecca said. Over the next hour we stood and watched as my family gathered around and cried. But I also noticed laughter as my kids shared stories of Rebecca and me. They laughed and cried equally. As Rebecca and I stood locked in each other's arms, we felt proud that our family was strong and would be fine without us. When the paramedics came to take my body away, both Rebecca and I took turns hugging and kissing the kids. We knew it would be a while before we saw them again. They never noticed us. Just a gentle breeze. Come on, baby, Rebecca said, wiping a tear from her eye. I have a lot to show you. You'll love it. Don't I need to see God or something? I asked. Well, yeah, he's expecting you, but don't worry, he's a good guy. She smiled. I paused and looked at Rebecca. She looked just like she did before we had Sarah. Then again, my body looked like it was the same age, too. Wait, there's love in heaven, I asked. Rebecca smiled. Rebecca looked at me with warm, inviting eyes. She grabbed my hand and started pulling me in a certain direction. Come and see for yourself, my dear, she said, her voice gentle and kind. Come and see. Hey, audience. If you liked this video and want to keep up with more thrilling stories, make sure to subscribe to Prince Cheating Tales and hit the notification bell. You don't want to miss out on our upcoming adventures. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next wonderful story.